Chapter 1. Naruto frowned at his teammate. The team had been more and more of an ass lately, but this just took the cake. It had happened about 10 minutes ago. Sasuke was always being pursued by Naruto's crush, Sakura, and normally he paid it no mind. But this time, it seemed, the stoic Uchiha had snapped. He slapped Sakura across the face, sending her to the ground. Naruto had prepared a large knuckle sandwich and was about to feed it to the duck ass, but Sakura stopped him. Even with a large red mark on her cheek and tears welling up in her eyes, she still said, "Naruto, stop. He's right. I got too far in his face. His ninja instincts kicked in and pushed me away. Leave it alone." Sasuke had smirked then. Not his usual arrogant smirk, although this one did still somehow contain his massive ego. No, this smile was, Naruto could only describe it as evil, corrupted, insane. Like the Uchiha really had snapped. Naruto didn't have much more time to contemplate this, as the last teams had just received their scrolls for the second stage of the Chūnin exams. The hot trenchcoat girl announced them to approach a gate, and they did so.
Gate 7.
Kakashi-sensei would be so proud at our ability to be cliché. The gates had opened, and now, 10 minutes later, Naruto was watching Sakura and Sasuke prepare a plan for the test. Sakura acted as though nothing was wrong, like everything was the same. Naruto couldn't think about anything else besides just how far off his rocker Sasuke seemed to be. Now, even his normal face looked crazy, like a madman whose plans were just starting to take effect. The blonde made an excuse to go to the bathroom just to get away from him. He really didn't like leaving Sakura alone with the guy, but he needed to come up with a plan of his own. Sasuke's gonna get us all killed or worse, I just know it. I'll need a backup plan when his fails. Naruto stood behind a fairly nearby tree and emptied himself. Hey, as long as I'm here, I might as well. Zipping his pants back up, he stopped as he heard movement coming from where his team was. Rushing back, he knew it was probably nothing, but something in his gut was telling him that they were in trouble. And so he left his piss spot, completely missing the ticked-off-looking giant snake that had just lost its prey. Returning to the clearing, he saw it empty. A swath of minor destruction was cut through the forest, though, so he followed that. After several minutes, he reached another clearing. He saw Sakura hiding behind Sasuke while he conversed with the Genin team from the Sound Village. The girl was leaning back against a tree, waiting for her teammates to finish up, apparently. Naruto watched from the side as Sasuke spoke. "So, you guys are here to help us pass?" The guy with bandages around his face answered. "Well, really only you, but if you request, we will pass the other two as well. Just come with us, and we can take you to our master. He can give you power beyond your wildest dreams." Naruto jumped out from the bushes and pointed defiantly at the Oto ninja. "Yeah, right. Like we would trust you guys." He lowered his arm and stood in front of Sasuke. "Besides, we can pass this on our own, right, Gudash?" All was quiet as Naruto stood there, wide-eyed, a kunai sticking out of his left shoulder blade. Sasuke removed his hand from the hilt and pushed the blonde forward, letting him fall to the ground. Sakura screamed and ran over to him, nervously checking the wound. The pinkette glared at her crush.
Sasuke-kun.
"What are you thinking? I know he can be kind of annoying at times, but that doesn't mean you should kill him." The Uchiha scoffed. "If he can't survive from a single knife wound, he doesn't deserve to be alive, anyway." Sakura's face grew into that of horror. But you pierced his heart from behind. You might have even punctured his lung, too. Anyone would die from that." She got up from her knees and pushed her face into Sasuke's. "Sasuke-kun, you have gone way too far this time." For the second time that day, the Uchiha smacked the Haruno girl to the ground. "Kami, you are just so very annoying. You're worse than Naruto." He turned to the Oto team. "One of you can take me to this master of yours. Whoever wants can entertain this slut." The girl, Kin, walked up and nodded. "Well, then I suppose I'll be the one to take you to Orochimaru-sama. Zaku, Dosu, you two can stay here and play." The two nodded, and Zaku grinned lecherously as Kin and Sasuke left. They approached Sakura, who was crying by this point, and started pulling her hair, fondling her body and ripping her clothes. It took longer than they thought it would. She was feisty when backed into a corner. Meanwhile, Naruto could feel himself slipping away. His heart wasn't even beating anymore, but he was still conscious. He could hear Sakura's screams of terror as she was undressed and beaten, but that wouldn't last long. He could feel a tugging on his mind, as though the Shinigami were trying to take him. No, that's not right. The tug was coming from his own body, the seal on his stomach to be exact. Eventually, he felt his strength give out, and his mind drifted away from the outside world. It's JN. The blonde Jinchuriki opened his eyes to a 5-story iron cage. There was a slip of paper with the kanji for seal on the bars, and engraved in the floor was the kanji for willpower. Behind the bars was the largest animal he had ever seen, too big for even the massive cage. There was a 9-tailed red-orange fox laying on the floor, head resting on its paws, eyes open and staring at him. Spoke in a male, demonic voice. "You know who I am. I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune, strongest of the living tailed beasts. I am a demon by blood and reputation, and you, Kit, are dying." Naruto nodded. "What's it to you? I die and you get set free. So why did you call me here? You did call me, right?" Naruto added, dropping his cool demeanor. The fox chuckled, a deep, dark sound that not many would hear and still have clean undies. "You have been misinformed, Kit. This seal prevents me from taking physical form at the death of my container. It will bleed me dry to try and keep you alive, which is the reason you are not dead yet. I will die before you do, as it takes my chakra and uses it to heal you. However, it cannot. Somehow that Uchiha managed to strike you with the tip of the blade piercing a chakra point. A lucky shot if I ever saw one. The chakra-conductive metal is messing with your coils, preventing the healing from reaching your wound. If he had hit a chakra point anywhere else on the body besides maybe your head, you would live easily. But your heart cannot pump scab makers to itself. The cells in that organ rarely, if ever, divide on their own, and so you will die. But there is an option." Naruto looked up at the fox hopefully. "Well, what is it?" "My power has more potential than what this seal uses it for. If I were to feed my chakra into you directly without the seal filtering it, I could save you. All you have to do is let me out. Release the seal. It's based entirely on your willpower, so really the only thing stopping you is you." Naruto considered this for a while. He had to save Sakura if he could, and the fox seemed sincere enough. Stepping forward, he was about to jump up to the seal paper when he saw something behind the Kyuubi. A door. A black door, with a rich golden glow coming out from beneath it. Kyuubi turned his head to look where Naruto was gazing, and his eyes widened. "Kit, be warned. I do not know what is behind that door. It was trapped in here with me when I was sealed away. It may be even more dangerous. I sense power almost as great as myself from it, and that alone should scare you. Take my offer. It will save you. Who knows what that door will do?" Naruto could hear the fear in Kyuubi's voice and see it in his face. But it was fear that Naruto wouldn't let him out, not necessarily that the blonde would open the door. Naruto walked past the bars and past the Kyuubi, who couldn't move in the tight space. Despite the fox's continued protests, he placed his hand on the doorknob, which seemed to be made of a large diamond, and turned. "It's JN." Sakura struggled furiously against her tormentors, but to no avail. They were stronger than her, and she was losing energy from their abuse. Her true virginity remained intact, though her hymen was already broken from an incident on the playground as a kid. But there were fingers inside her, now, wriggling around, trying to get her ready. But she knew, with some kind of twisted pride, that she would never be ready. Despite Dosu's attempts to get an automatic, biological reaction from her, she was still relatively dry down there. Zaka's penis was in her face, though trying to force its way into her mouth, but she kept biting it every time it got near, which, of course, earned her another slap and a bad taste in her mouth. Then they paused and tensed visibly. She was confused for a moment, but then she felt it. Chakra. It was in the air, and it was thick, dripping with killer intent. Sakura turned her head to the source and saw Naruto, on the ground, covered in a golden glow. She could see him twitching, and finally she noticed why. The kunai in his back was slowly sliding out, as though it were being pushed from within. Dosu and Zaku let Sakura fall to the ground as they watched Naruto slowly pull himself to his feet, steam rising from the wound on his back as it closed rapidly. Naruto could feel liquid power running through him, the wound closing as though it were never there. Then he felt a pressure in his shoulder blades. When it released, a skeletal bat wing structure burst from his back, ripping his clothes. The Odo-nin and Sakura gaped at the development. It was as though the bone wings weren't made of bone. They were more like clear blue diamond, hollow diamond with some kind of golden liquid flowing through them. Then more diamond bone burst from above the boys, but sprouting into a tail, shaped exactly like his spine would be, except at the end. The end had 3 spikes splitting off from the tip. The wings stretched and popped their joints, the tail swishing behind him, spikes twitching independently. Naruto rolled his shoulders and neck, testing them. He opened his eyes, revealing his blue irises, the malice looking out of place in those orbs, yet deadly all the same. Perhaps it was the golden pupil, but he made it work. Naruto stepped forward, and the Odo shinobi stepped back. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. Nope, sorry. Too late to run away. You have done wrong by me by hurting my precious person. Now you must be punished. Sakura's eye grew wide as Naruto thrust his wings at her tormentors, piercing them through the stomach. Their bodies convulsed for a moment, then slumped over. Naruto withdrew his wings and let them fall to the ground. Turning, he looked at Sakura, then immediately looked away. Did they? Sakura looked down and seemed to notice for the first time that she was naked. Covering herself as best she could, she shook her head, blushing furiously. And no,
I'm alright.
more or less. Naruto, what happened to you? He chuckled and rubbed the back of his head, still facing away. I don't rightly know. I was dying, then I got sucked into my seal, you know, the one with… Anyway, I opened a door or something, and next thing I know, I wake up, feeling better than ever, and more ticked off than I've ever felt. Here, come on. Let's get back to our packs and get you into some clothes. Sakura nodded and made to get up, but a pain shot through her leg, and she fell back to the ground. Ugh. Okay. Yeah, that's not happening. Naruto risked a look back and saw the state she was in. Bruises all over her, a cut on her cheek, and a very ominous purple mark on her left shin. What's wrong, Sakura-chan? She looked up and shrieked, Don't look! Turn around! He did immediately. Once she calmed down, she said, I think my leg's broken. Naruto frowned. Well, we can't stay here. Storm's coming. I can send a Kagebunshin to get our packs, but otherwise we need to move. You sure you can't walk? Even as he said it, thunder rolled across the sky, and he shot out a clone, complete with the skeletal wings and tail, which ran back to their original clearing. Sakura tried bending her knee and rolling her ankle, and winced. Yeah, I'm sure. I suppose. Why, you'll just have to… carry me. Naruto's face grew hot. Well, I could do that. The clone returned with the packs and Naruto started looking for Sakura's spare clothes. Here, let's get you dressed, fur-plip. Naruto and Sakura looked up at the sky and felt the rain begin to fall. Sakura's eyes grew wide. I guess there's no time for that then. She looked over at her blonde, and indeed now only teammate, and narrowed her eyes. You better not try any funny stuff, mister. You are to carry me to shelter. Leave me my bag, and leave the area while I change. Naruto chuckled nervously. I'm not a pervert, Sakura-chan. At least not normally. She adjusted herself to cover her breasts and crotch as best as she could. Yeah, well, this isn't exactly a normal circumstance, is it? Come on, you can turn around now, but just remember our agreement. Naruto nodded and swung their packs over his shoulders. Turning around, he braced himself for the nosebleed, but it never came. She was beautiful, of course sexy too, at least to him, but it was coupled with a respect far too great to have inappropriate thoughts in this situation. Walking over to her, he gently picked her up under the knees and back, bridal style. He could see her blushing furiously, and he himself was losing feeling in the rest of his body from all the blood rushing to his face. And another part of him, but that was a natural, biological reaction. She couldn't possibly get upset at that. It seemed his tail knew what to do while he moved. It automatically counterbalanced him as he jumped through the trees. I think these wings actually work, at least as gliders. Anyway, I'm jumping farther and faster now. Sakura looked up at him. Really? But they're just skeletons. How could they help? Naruto blinked and realized he must have been thinking out loud. Oh well, I don't know. Then again, I don't know what this means either. All I know is that I'm going to be practicing these while you're changing. Hey, I think I see some shelter. Sure enough, not a minute later and Naruto landed in front of a shallow cave, just big enough for 4 people comfortably. Sakura squinted against the rain and wind. Good thing too. This storm is picking up. Naruto hopped inside and pulled a sealless clone, something he had worked on during his C-rank turned A-rank mission in Wave. The clone pulled a blanket out of their packs, which Naruto placed Sakura on. Removing the packs from his shoulders, he put them next to the girl and turned around. Now I'm going to be right outside. Call me in when you're done. Got it. Okay, I promise I'll hurry, so you can get out of the rain. Naruto gave her a thumbs up over his shoulder. I'll be fine. You just be careful. When you're done, I'll splint that leg. And he left, back out into the wind and the rain just outside the cave. Sakura grabbed her pack and looked into it. She hadn't really known what they were going to be doing for this test when she packed, so she had tried to cover her bases. Unfortunately, with everything she had put in there was only room for 1 extra pair of clothes, and it wasn't even her normal outfit. Pulling on her underwear, she started wrapping her breasts with the medical tape like every kunoichi is taught when bras are unavailable. They weren't big by any means, but it still bothered her when there was nothing to hold them. The next bit was a problem, though. The black shorts, which were different in that they had a light red stripe down each side, were skin-tight, and her leg was broken. She managed, though, with some pain and got them up onto her hips. Let's see. What else did I put in here? A metal mesh V-neck shirt, apparently. She pulled that on and dug a little more. Aha! Oh crap. Sakura held up a red zipper shirt with her family's white circle on the back, similar to the top part of the dress she normally wore. Unfortunately, this one was from when she was just a little younger. Must have grabbed it by mistake. Pulling it on, she found it still fit, mostly, though the zipper didn't go all the way up. Thankfully, the V-neck of the mesh shirt hid it from view. She may be wearing a shirt a couple sizes too small, but she didn't need to look like that Anko woman. She noticed that about 2 inches of her midriff was exposed, too, but it would do for now. She hadn't packed a skirt, thinking she had thrown her battle dress in there instead of this old shirt, so her skin-tight shorts were all that was there. All in all, she looked all right, and the exposed skin wasn't slutty, so she called it a win. Naruto, I'm done, you can come in now. It's JN. Naruto left the cave to let the girl get dressed. Seeing a large pine tree 10 feet away, he took a stance. His legs were bent and spread, but his feet were slightly closer together than a horse stance. Arms were loosely held aloft, and his right side was leading slightly. Then he struck. His right wing folded its fingers into the main branch and stretched at the tree. They did that before, too. Are the skinny branches vulnerable? The wing struck the tree, but barely. It seemed 10 feet was the limit of each wing. Testing this, he held his right wing stretched and struck with his left. It hit the tree too, again only scratching the surface, though a little less than the right wing due to his stance. He nodded. Yep, they're both 10 feet, even at the same time. Withdrawing his wings, he brought the right one in for examination. Touching it, he could feel with them. They felt like just another appendage, like his body had had them all its life. Touching the finger branches, he found that they were just as tough as the main arm, but the arrangement of the bones prevented striking movements with them spread. So it's automatic due to structure. Okay, I get that. Tail. Bringing it around to the front, he inspected the end. The 3 spikes coming off the tip seemed to be able to move independently, like 3 long, bony fingers, complete with joints. Naruto looked at the tree and readied himself. Striking this time with his tail, he subconsciously knew to bring the tips of the fingers together and make a point at the end. The tail struck the tree and went all the way through it. He estimated the reach to be about 20 feet. Now that's cool. It's like it stretched. Bringing it back, he watched as it retracted to a mere 6 feet long, twitching behind him. Naruto thought for a moment. I wonder. He looked around and saw a small rock in the now mud. Reaching with his wing, he tried using the branches to pick it up, but no luck. They just weren't meant for it. Trying again with his tail, the 3 fingers lifted it from the ground easily. Alright, that's cool. Let's test how accurate I am. Aiming at a tree more than 50 feet away, he whipped his tail and flung the rock. It struck the trunk perfectly. He would have tried with a kunai, but he heard Sakura yell from inside the cave, "Naruto, I'm done, you can come in now." Walking inside and shaking water out of his hair, he looked at Sakura on the blanket. "Wow, you look great. Why don't you ever wear that?" "Huh." Sakura raised an eyebrow at him. "Because this is an old shirt that, by all rights, barely fits me." Naruto chuckled. "Well, it sure looks like it fits. From where I'm standing, it doesn't look constricting or anything." "Well, no, it's not, but..." Naruto grinned. "Then what does it matter? Now drop it, and let me splint that leg," he said, before leaving once more to find a few sticks for the splint, cursing himself for not doing so earlier. Sakura looked down at herself and tried to imagine a mirror. "I guess it does look pretty good. And it is comfortable." She looked up as Naruto returned, once more shaking his hair dry. "Although you could do with a haircut, it just doesn't match the outfit," he said, as he pulled a length of rope and some medical tape out of his bag. Sakura contemplated this while he wrapped her leg. He was very gentle but firm where it counted. Kind of like his personality. She had been growing her hair since she found out Sasuke liked girls with long hair. "I don't know if I could cut my hair. Sasuke likes it this way." Before she could catch herself, she said it. But the damage was done. Naruto pulled a little tighter than he needed to on the splint, making her wince. "That team betrayed me. Betrayed us. He tried to kill me, he left you to be beaten and raped. If you still care about him, fine, but I'm done with that asshole." "Naruto."
No.
"He has snapped, Sakura-chan. He's had this crazy look in his eye since he slapped you outside the gates, like he enjoyed the power he had over you. And then when you stopped me from decking him, it only got worse, like his dominance had just spread to me in his eyes. Sakura-chan, he's nothing anymore. Leave him." He finished the splint and looked up at her, having just realized something. "Who told you he likes long hair, anyway?" Sakura thought for a moment. A note. A piece of paper he was doodling on next to his desk. It had little stick figures of people and dogs and stuff, and a note at the bottom that said he preferred long-haired girls. That was the 2nd year of the academy. Naruto blinked, then started laughing. "Sakura-chan, that was Kiba. He sat right next to Sasuke, remember? Didn't the dogs tip you off?" Sakura reddened at the thought. The dogs should have made it obvious, that's true. "So, he doesn't like long-haired girls?" Naruto's face grew dismissive. "He probably doesn't even like girls at all, Sakura-chan." She knew she should hit him for that, but instead she giggled. Normally she would have hit him, but somehow, Sasuke had lost a lot of luster in her eyes. "Somehow nothing, he practically told those guys to rape me." Naruto smiled seeing her laugh. Pulling out some more blankets, he spread a few over Sakura. "We should get some sleep since this storm is probably gonna last the night. I'll whip us up something simple, then we'll head out tomorrow." Sasuke took our scroll. so now we need to find both of them to pass. Sakura looked at him as he sifted through the packs for food. But Naruto, we have to get through this test as a team. If one of us dies or we get separated, we fail anyway. Even if we somehow get both scrolls before the 5 days are up, we'll never be let into the central tower without Sasuke. Naruto grinned, not looking up from the portable fire he was setting up. I'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Sasuke abandoned us, so he shouldn't get in anyway. Plus I killed 2 of the sound genin back there, so that girl's team should fail too. But somehow I get the feeling that both of them will pass this test. If they can do it, so can we. He finished the food he was preparing and handed some to Sakura. Here, eat, it'll be good for your leg. Sakura looked down at the rice and veggies. It wasn't gourmet, but she would never expect that on a mission, so why expect it here? Taking a bite, her eyes grew wide. Naruto, what is this? It's rice and veggies. I know, but I can taste pork. Wouldn't that spoil? Naruto laughed at his friend's amazement. Yeah, it would, at least until I figure out a way to stop it. That's the extract you taste. I cook bacon and pork and other meats to eat. Then I take the drippings, not the blood, mind you, but the self-contained sauce and bottle it. It doesn't spoil for months. And you can take it on the road to add flavor without needing to cook meat separately to put it in your meal. Sakura grew silent for a moment, before saying, I didn't know you could cook. With all the ramen you eat, I just assumed. He smiled sadly. That I didn't know how to take care of myself? I have not once had ramen the same way twice. Did you know that? I've been teaching myself to cook since I was 8. The Ikarakus have been helping since I was 10. I am constantly looking for ways to make square, nutritious, energizing, and filling meals while out on missions quickly and effectively. We have soldier pills for chakra, nutrient bars for the rest of the body, but there is still the debilitating effects of an empty stomach. If each team that goes into the field could be equipped with someone who could make what I'm trying to invent, and still able to fight at team capacity, there would be a lot less mission fails and Kias. Same goes for medic needs. If there was a combat-proficient medic on every team, the failure and death rates would lower too. He took a few bites of his food before speaking again. Our Yondaime Hokage tried to push the medic bit through during his command. He never got it past the council, though. Sakura quirked her head, intrigued. Why not? That sounds like a great idea. Apparently the mindset was that medics were trained to heal, not to fight, and so they would only get hurt on the battlefield. And who would heal the healers? But that's just it. Isn't it? You can train them to fight and to heal. They just didn't get that. Is that what you're going to do? When you become Hokage? One of the things, yeah. There's so much about this village that just reeks of bad decisions. And I feel like the only one who wants to fix any of it is me. Sakura reached over and put her hand on the blonde's shoulder. I'll help you. Fix it, now that I see your reasoning, I get how screwed up this place is now. I guess I just never noticed because it's my home, and it's hard to hate the place you call home. Naruto flashed a foxy grin, letting her know it was all right. Well, thanks, Sakura-chan. Now, eat your, apparently delicious food. Tomorrow we go scroll hunting. She nodded and finished her bowl. I'm learning more and more about Naruto each moment. Speaking of new things, Naruto, how are you going to sleep with those wings and tail? He looked down at his body and thought about this. If they burst from his body, they should be able to retract into it, right? No sooner had this thought formed than the wings and tail jerked back into his body, leaving holes in his clothes at the shoulder blades and tailbone. Like that. Ah, crap, now I gotta change too. That's going to be a problem. She giggled as he spun around, trying to better see the damage, and inadvertently exposing part of his butt to her. She didn't really mind. Somehow, being carried, stark naked through the rain has lessened her embarrassment around him. Go figure. I'll help you figure something out tomorrow. I know a little about sewing. Naruto plopped down on his blankets, face red from shaking his butt around in front of her. Thanks, Sakura-chan. I know I sound like a broken record, but let's get some sleep. For real this time. She nodded, and they curled up under their covers, waiting out the storm and ending the first day of their second exam. *HJN*. Chapter 2. Naruto stood at the mouth of the cave and watched the rain as it slowed in the early morning sun. Storm's letting up. Looks like we'll be able to head out today after all. Sakura looked up from her blanket. That's great. Your pants are almost done, just need to fit the opening to your tail. Throw these on, and come here, she said, tossing his orange pants at him. Naruto pulled them on, covering his ripped boxers. Walking over, he turned his back to the pinkette and slowly let his tail emerge, being careful not to allow the blade-like tri-pronged fingers to get near her. At least the wings don't need to be out at the same time. Sakura tugged and pulled at the hole she had sewn into the seat of his pants. Picking up the needle made out of a squirrel bone she had him fetch, it was a giant squirrel, too, which made it a bit harder. Damn forest of death. At least he was able to whittle it down. And started sewing it closer shut. Then she picked up what she thought to be quite the nifty little flap she had made. It was made of the missing material from his pants, and a plate of curved metal from Naruto's trap set, with bits of elastic from the same set dangling off. Attaching it, she looked at her creation. Okay, Naruto, put the tail away, slowly. He did so, and she watched as the curved metal prevented the spine-like bones of the diamond tail from catching and folding the flap sewn to the top of the hole. As the tail retracted into Naruto's body, the elastic did its job and covered the hole with the material flap. Sakura smiled. I think it worked. Try taking it in and out a little faster. Now, let's see if the flap holds up. Naruto did so, and lo and behold, Sakura's invention worked. He spun around and grinned. Thanks, Sakura-chan, you're a genius. She waved her hand in a dismissive gesture. It was simple, no big deal. Your jacket will be even easier, though I'm afraid your shirt and boxers are going to stay ripped for a while, she said with a laugh. He was about to speak when he heard voices outside the cave. Turning, he settled into a crouch and crept forward, Sakura keeping absolutely silent behind him. Reaching the mouth of the cave, he peeked out and watched a team of AIM shinobi walk past, arguing about where to go. Naruto kept his chakra down in case the one with his eyes covered was a sensory type and watched them pass. Once he felt confident they were gone, he went back to Sakura in the cave. Looks like the forest is up. Other teams, too. Come on, let's break camp and head out. I'll be fine with a ripped jacket for now. Naruto and Sakura packed up their belongings, which Naruto then slung over his shoulders. Assigning a clone to carry Sakura, leaving him available in case of an attack, they set out from their shelter. The previous day's rain settled into a drop a minute. Naruto and his clone jumped through the trees. He and Sakura had agreed that they would stay closer to the tower, hoping to find teams who had already gathered their scrolls heading inside. Naruto and his clone were both traveling with their wings out to reduce drag and increase their speed. It was well over an hour in the huge forest before they encountered anything. In this case, it was a genjutsu, a fairly simple one, but it was large. Sakura pointed it out when she noticed the same pear-shaped tree 3 times. Setting her down, Naruto summoned a couple more clones to surround her, and released the genjutsu, following Sakura's instructions in the matter. All of a sudden, standing in front of them were the 2 of the 3 AIM shinobi from earlier. The one with both eyes uncovered laughed under his rebreather. See, I told you setting a trap near the tower would work. Now, hand over your scroll and we'll only kill you a little. That last bit was directed at Naruto. Sorry to disappoint you, but we're fresh out of scrolls at the moment. You could give us yours, though, as a kindness for those who have none. Naruto answered, grinning deviously. Suddenly there was 100 AIM shinobi surrounding them, all of them looking like the first 2. If you don't have any scrolls, then you're only in the way. We'll kill you as a service to the test, since only weaklings would lose their scroll, skeleton freak. And then there was an arrow through Naruto's right arm. He grimaced in pain and looked around, but not one of the enemy had moved. Are they Kage Bunshins? I can't see any reason why they could create this many as easily as I could, so they must be illusions. Ha! A single arrow is nothing. Let's bring out my own army. Shall we?
Kage Bunsin no Jutsu.
The clearing filled with smoke that quickly disappeared. 20 Narutos, complete with the skeletal wings, all glared at the offending team and launched. Each clone swept their wings out as they ran through the ranks, the enemy dissolving into either water or nothingness with each smack of the diamond appendages. He himself ran straight for the original two Chūnin, whom he hadn't taken his eyes off of. Jumping, he gathered his tail back for a strike, while his arm reared back for his signature left hook. Stabbing the one on the right and hitting the left one hard enough to shatter his jaw, his eyes widened when they all faded into nothingness. Bunshin! He turned around and saw that the rest of the army were all bunshins of some kind as well. Naruto grunted in pain as another arrow pierced his right knee from behind, and he spun around just in time to see a glint in the trees before it disappeared. Naruto jumped back to Sakura and her clone guards, wincing as he landed. Speaking to a clone, he told it where he suspected at least part of the enemy was, and to keep Sakura safe. Creating another 40 clones, he spread them out in random directions, with 2 heading deceivingly into the right direction. Deceiving because they were looking in the wrong direction. Pulling out the arrow from his arm, he winced as steam rose from it as the hole closed. Doing the same with his leg, he handed the 2 arrows to Sakura. "Hold on to these. I've got an idea for later, maybe." She nodded, entirely confused, but impressed that Naruto was taking charge so easily. He turned around and counted to 3. Then he ran at the point where he last saw the glint of metal, his wings increasing his speed. Jumping through the trees, he pounced on the first thing he saw, which was an aim ninja with one eye covered holding a crossbow. The boy tried to run, but Naruto's 2 other clones closed him off on all sides. Naruto let his tail emerge and grabbed the genin by the torso with it. Holding him up, Naruto searched his pockets and pouches.
No scroll.
Must be with the other 2. Taking the kid's quiver of arrows, he knocked him out against a tree and left him there. Turning around, Naruto jumped back into the clearing. A moment later, the other 2 aim shinobi popped out of the trees, chased by a single Naruto clone. One of them turned around and flew through some hand signs, shouting, "Sutin! Mizu Emochi no Jutsu! Water release, water blast jutsu!" Water gathered from the freshly rained-on ground and shot at the clone, destroying it. But Naruto was already there and grabbed the guy with his tail and spun, throwing him into his comrade. The 2 bowled over each other, landing in a heap. Before they could react, clones surrounded them, grabbing limbs and holding sharp wings at their necks. Naruto walked up and searched them while they screamed and shouted at him to let them go. Yeah, calm down. You lost fair and square, we get your scroll now." Finally he found it, a green earth scroll in the genin's pouch. He turned away and the clones were about to knock them out, when one of them yelled at him. "You were supposed to be weak, a dead last that couldn't protect himself." Naruto stopped, his free hand clenched into a fist at his side. Too calmly to be calm, he said, "I was never a dead last. Sabotage and misdirection destroys the meaning of any learning. You can't judge me because no one has seen what I can do. Not even me." At that, his tail whipped out and stabbed the aim shinobi through the chest, but missing his heart, leaving him alive long enough to hear the next thing Naruto said. "But I'm starting to get an idea. It's JN." Sakura looked up at her teammate from her position in the clone's arms. "Hey, Naruto." "HM? What is it, Sakura-chan?" She hesitated, but spoke nonetheless. "There's something that's been bothering me since yesterday. When I asked about the wings and tail, you said something about a seal, but then you stopped. I didn't want to press the matter, since I was naked and we were out in the open, but now it's haunting me again." Naruto was silent for a while, simply leading them through the trees. Eventually he seemed to make up his mind. "Promise you won't tell anyone unless I say it's okay?" She was surprised, to say the least, but she promised, feeling a sense of dread in her chest as she did so. Naruto looked to his clone and nodded once. They landed in a clearing and the clone set Sakura against a tree. "Sakura-chan, remember on Tezuna's bridge back in Wave Country? The battle there with Zabuza and that Haku guy?" She nodded. "Remember how it ended?" She thought for a moment. At the time she had been scared slightly shitless, so her attention on anything not in her immediate vicinity was fuzzy. I think you and Kakashi made a bunch of clones to scare the thugs away after they didn't run when the villagers showed up. Then Zabuza killed Gatu and he died next to Haku, right? Naruto nodded. And just before that? How did Sasuke and I get out of Haku's jutsu? She strained her memory. Seemed too blurry, like she didn't want to remember. Didn't you break those mirrors? With Yua. Her eyes widened in remembrance. An image of Naruto screaming at the sky, red chakra swirling around him. His face changed into something feral filled her mind. With some red jutsu or something. He sighed. He had hoped that she remembered, and apparently she did. Now came the hard bit. Sakura-chan, that wasn't a jutsu. That was chakra. Pure chakra and rage. But it wasn't mine. It wasn't your chakra? Or you weren't enraged? The wrath was mine, but the chakra, it was born of a demon inside me. The Kyuubi no Kitsune that the Yondaime supposedly killed 14 years ago wasn't really killed. Demons can't be killed in their true form, only contained. He continued the story, relaying almost the exact same words that the Sandaime had told him the day he got back. The Yondaime took me, the only child born that day, and sealed the Kyuubi. He needed a newborn whose chakra coils weren't developed yet, so the Kyuubi's energy wouldn't rip them apart from the inside. Anyway, it was at a sacrifice of his own life, and the Kyuubi still did a lot of damage during the attack. Almost all of the village hates me because they seem to think I am the Kyuubi. Afterwards, Old Man Hokage found me, and you pretty much know the rest. He tried to look like he didn't really care how she saw him now, but he knew he must be failing horribly. Sakura, though, just sat there, and sat there, and sat there some more. A squirrel ran up and grabbed a nut next to her hand, then proceeded to eat it on the spot. And she sat there. The squirrel climbed up onto her lap and settled into a curl, possibly sleeping. And still she sat there, apparently asleep herself. Or broken. Naruto started to say Sakura-chan, but was interrupted by sounds of an argument off to the right. Not wanting to get caught up in that with his teammate in this state, he moved to pick her up, but the squirrel on her lap lifted its head and chirped at him, assuming a protective stance. Or at least what would be a protective stance if squirrels knew what that was. Move, squirrel. More chirps. I need to get her out of here. There's a battle not far away. This time it hissed at him. Okay, Fine. You protect her. Then, I'll go see what's going on. He turns to leave, then stops. I was just arguing with a squirrel. And then put said squirrel in charge of Sakura-chan.
Kakebunsin no jutsu.
5 Naruto clones popped out and took up position around the pinkette, doing what was probably a much better job of protecting her than the squirrel. It's JN. Naruto crept along the bushes, watching a team from. Naruto couldn't see their headband from this angle, but the leader seemed to have 3 umbrellas? Yeah, 3 umbrellas on his back. Naruto watched as that cat costume guy with the purple makeup from Suna was trying to dissuade the unknown genin from fighting. The tall blonde in his team was next to him, and the creepy redhead was there, as well, standing in the back, seemingly bored. Naruto couldn't hear much, but apparently the redhead got upset at something, 'cause he stepped forward. Then the guy with the umbrellas threw them into the air, and they rained down senbon on the Suna shinobi. But the redhead was surrounded by sand, catching the senbon and protecting him. Naruto shivers as the sand user gets an inhuman gleam in his eye. Naruto knew that look well. He had seen it on enough drunk villagers. It was bloodlust, the desire to kill everything that had ever offended him. Suddenly the other guy was encased in sand, and the redhead brought his hand up, palm out. His teammates were incredibly worried, and as was the unknown team. Naruto heard the next bit loud and clear, as though it traveled into his mind more than his ears. The redhead said, "Mother wants your blood. Your death will prove my existence. Sand burial." Then the boy clenched his outstretched hand in a fist, and the sand crushed the genin, blood spraying with force from the cocoon. The boy glared at the dead genin's team, who dropped their scroll, a heaven scroll, Naruto noted, and ran away. The sand slithered its way into the redhead's gourd, and the guy with the makeup walked forward, cautiously. Gaara, what do you want to do with their scroll? It's the same as ours. Naruto knew he was probably an idiot, but something about this Gaara made him move. He retracted his wings and tail and walked out of the bushes, ignoring the slightly familiar sound of a gasp off to his left. You could give it to me. This way I won't have to try and fight you, seeing as how I'll probably lose. We don't have any scrolls, already having lost our Earth scroll, he lied. He hoped he could keep his face straight, as he was truly scared. There was a malice that boy emitted when he killed that brought bad thoughts to Naruto's head. Demonic thoughts. Gaara seemed to think for a moment, then started walking toward him. Naruto kept perfectly still, ready to strike with his hidden tail if need be. Gaara studied him for another moment, the second time that week, and then said, Mother sympathizes with you. I wish to see you in a less worn state. It will be interesting to see you fight. Then the heaven scroll was lifted on a fountain of sand and held for Naruto to take. He looked at it, then smiled and plucked the scroll off with no hesitation. All of a sudden, he felt a kinship with this boy. Gone was the malice and the bloodlust. It seemed his teammates felt it, too, for they were incredibly surprised. He bade goodbye to Gaara and his team, thanking him for the scroll. Heading back through the underbrush, he found Sakura had recovered, and was now in the lap of one of his clones, having her hair stroked and crying. The squirrel seemed to be gone. Cautiously, he moved forward, the other clones parting before him. Reaching the girl, he crouched down next to the clone holding her. It looked up at its creator and mouthed, "You." Naruto nodded and put his hand on her shoulder, gently whispering, "Sakura-chan." She turned around, her eyes puffy and her cheeks wet. Somehow realizing this was the real Naruto, she flung her arms around his neck and continued weeping, this time interrupted with unintelligible words and what he can only assume to be sentences. Naruto wrapped his arms around her, trying to decipher some of her mutterings while letting a calming aura envelope the girl. Yo. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry, she tried to say, severely hampered by her sobbing. Sure, it's all right. Just tell me what's wrong, he said gently, petting her hair soothingly. It took a while, but she finally calmed down long enough to explain her plight. You had it so hard, I made it so hard for you. They all think you are a demon, they would have me think you are a demon, but the only one, Sniff, you could ever be a demon to is your enemies. You are, Sniff, the kindest person I know. You have such a dash. Naruto interrupted her before she could start crying again. Sakura-chan, there's no one here you need to convince. I know what I am, whatever I may look like now, he added, twitching his wings for good measure. He looked down into her eyes and said, Thank you, though, for understanding. She nodded and smiled. Then her cheeks turned a certain shade of red, and she seemed to hesitate on something for a moment. Looking up at him, he was utterly and completely surprised when she reached up and kissed him gently on the lips. The blonde boy holding her couldn't quite comprehend what was occurring, as he just sat there, dazed, when she pulled away. Sakura looked up at him with a cheeky smile on her face. Now don't you go getting any wrong ideas, Naruto. She pointed at him, poking him in the chest to emphasize her point. Just because Sasuke turned out to be a traitorous piece of trash doesn't mean I'm gonna go running after you. Now, that kiss was just a thank you for being there for me all my life. Got it? Naruto grinned with his signature fox face. Got it. But that doesn't mean I'm not gonna try and get more from you, Sakura-chan. I wouldn't want it any other way, she thought, happy to have any kind of normalcy at this point, as he picked her up and told her of his encounter with the Suna team. So we've got both scrolls now? The blonde nodded. Yup, but we should find another place to lie in until morning. Even I get tired sometimes, and I didn't get any sleep last night. Her eyes widened in shock. Naruto, you should have said something. We could have rested longer. He shook his head and started moving, this time neglecting to leave his own hands free, carrying her himself. He noted that the other clones had dispersed themselves at the kiss, and made a mental note of how he suddenly knew how his ripped jacket looked on him from behind. No, it was only proper that I stay up and take watch. This forest is deadly, and it probably only gets worse at night. That giant squirrel was no pushover. She giggled slightly at him, remembering his tale of how he had bravely slain the 15-foot rodent to get her a needle. She had to admit, even with the obvious bits of exaggeration, it sounded like quite the display. Right, you're right. Let's find some place to sleep. It's not like we're falling behind. We'll still have 3 days to get to the center tower. Naruto nodded. It was true, they were making great time. Moving through the trees, he heeded Sakura's advice to stay close to the river when possible, as there was likely to be more opportunities for shelter. Soon, they found a small overhang, partially obscured from view by some overhanging roots. Once under cover, they realized just how small the overhang was, though. Barely big enough for one person, it would in no way hold them both and their bags. But night had fallen, and Sakura could hear things rustling more than before. Look, we'll have to just squeeze in there. I don't want to risk traveling at night if we can help it. Naruto nodded, and shouldered through the curtain of roots, sprinkling them with dirt as he did so. Ack! Sorry, he mumbled, setting her down in the small enclosure. Reaching into his pack, he pulled out a camouflage sheet, one he had used many times to escape pursuers after pranks. Feeling around in his weapons pouch, he sighed as he realized he didn't have any senbon. Not really wanting to put a whole kunai through the sheet just to pin it up for extra protection from enemy eyes, he looked around him for something else. Sakura had twisted around onto her hands and knees, trying to at least make a sort of pillow to support them, as the tight space would be quite uncomfortable otherwise. Suddenly, she felt something her butt, and she squeaked, whirling around with a red face. Naruto, what are you doing? He recoiled slightly and muttered out, I just wanted to know if you had any senbon. Almost instantly, she calmed down. It wasn't right for her to react so violently. It has never been like him to just grope somebody, so perhaps she should have realized it was a tap, not a grab. Oh, right here, sorry, she said, fishing around in her weapons pouch and handed him a couple of the thin metal rods. Thanks. Turning around, he pinned the cover up behind to the roots, effectively curtain, hiding them from view. Crouching down, he looked at her nervously for a moment before saying, So, how are we doing this? Sakura finished arranging her pack as a pillow and moved out of the way. With a slight tint to her face, she said, Lay down on your back. Doing as he was told, he watched curiously as she shifted around and laid partially on top of him, basically hugging her body to his right side. He stiffened when, a few minutes later, she wiggled around, trying to get comfortable. Sakura couldn't quite believe that she had even considered this. Well, she wouldn't have had this been 2 days ago, but now he was her only teammate, her only source of strength from which to pull. Of course, he had always been that of his own violation, but this was different. She was sleeping with the guy. Well, okay, not really sleeping with him, but she was on him. What would SAS? I don't even want to think about that guy, she said to herself. He's an asshole and a prick and a traitor. Who cares what he would think? Not me. I didn't care what he would have thought when I kissed Naruto, and I certainly don't care now. Naruto is right. It's just him and me. Now, Sasuke has nothing to do with it. Her inner persona agreed wholeheartedly, currently smashing a chibi Sasuke's nuts with a giant hammer, over and over. Who the hell cares that Naruto and I are like this? We'll be up and at the tower in no time. It's not like this'll be a reoccurring thing. But was it? Some part of her felt comfortable with another body against her. No, she corrected herself, Naruto's body against her. He was warm, and she just fit his side so well. It was hard not to feel relaxed and safe. That was it, wasn't it? Naruto made her feel safe. He always had. But that didn't mean she was falling for him. No. She couldn't be, right? Right? Inner Sakura was silent, for once, though she was hiding a Naruto doll behind her back. Traitor, Sakura said to her, before forcibly leaving the conversation that was sure to drive her insane. Wriggling around for a nice little nook to fit her body into against the boy next to her, she felt him stiffen his whole body. "This okay?" she asked, hiding her nervousness. Naruto relaxed when she stopped moving and nodded.
Yeah.
All was silent for a moment as they each tried to slow their heart rate. Sakura spoke first. "So, I was thinking, what are we going to tell Kakashi-sensei? And will we be able to continue to the next stage? Assuming we live that long," she added silently. Naruto didn't respond immediately. It was a confusing situation. Technically, they shouldn't be allowed to pass this exam, since it was stated that the whole team must survive. Then again, the whole team did survive. As far as they knew, Sasuke was still out there, somewhere with that sound girl. He betrayed them and tried to get one of them killed, but officially they were still a team. Voicing this, he felt as Sakura's head nod in agreement. "Yeah, but if he doesn't reach the tower with us, will all three of us fail? That's what I'm worried about, that if we get there before him, we won't qualify." Naruto smiled that she went straight to the assumption that they would reach the tower before the Uchiha. "I wonder if she's realized what he is yet. We'll just have to play it calm when we get there and explain what happened. I'm sure if we tell the whole truth, somebody important will believe us. Honesty counts for a lot among comrades." "Is that why you told me about the Kyuubi?" Naruto's smile faded slightly, but stayed in place, looking more sad than cheerful. "Yeah, partially. You asked, and so I told you. You can't tell anyone, though. It's a massive secret that only a handful of people know the whole story of. Most just have a perverted version, or bastardized view on it." Sakura nodded, completely understanding. "I promise again, Naruto. I won't tell anyone your secret." She hugged him tighter to her at that, strengthening her statement. Naruto smiled warmly once again, and slithered his right arm under and around her, holding her just as tightly. "Thanks, Sakura-chan. Besides, I felt like the more you know about me, the less of a reason you have not to trust me. And the more you trust me, the more I'll get to hug a beautiful girl," he finished, fishing for a positive response, trying to make her blush cutely, hoping to restore some of their old routine, and maybe checking on her position about Sasuke all at once. He got 3 out of 4, which wasn't too bad, in his opinion. She did blush, which was definitely cute, and she gave a positive response while simultaneously not mentioning Sasuke. "Thanks, Naruto. You always make me feel better, even when I'm not feeling all that bad to start with." However, his hopes of normality were dashed as she kissed him for the second time that day, though this time on the cheek, and then cuddled even closer to him, if that was possible. Yeah, 3 out of 4 definitely isn't too bad. Naruto felt Sakura fall asleep against him and soon let the same happen to him. Tomorrow they would get to the tower and figure out what to do about Sasuke and their team, but right now was sleep time. And there was little sleep better than what there was to be had by those two that night. Chapter 3. Naruto awoke to that odd air that you get in the wild in the mornings. That cold nip that leaves you refreshed and ready to go, while still somehow making you want to stay in bed. There was another reason he just wanted to lay there, however, consisted of 2 parts. 1. They had both scrolls and thereby had no reason to rush. Sleeping in was something they could afford to do now. 2. Sakura had huddled completely on top of him in the middle of the night and seemed to have tried to burrow her head into his chest. Yes, Naruto was in heaven. Unfortunately, heaven was very high and he wasn't dead. And so, inevitably, he fell as the pink-haired girl of his dreams slowly woke up. Groaning a little in stiffness, Sakura tilted her head up and looked at him. "Morning, Naruto." The blonde smiled a little and responded in kind. "Morning, Sakura-chan." Suddenly at a loss for conversation topics, he latched onto the first thing in his head, no matter how dorky it sounded. How'd you sleep?" Sakura rolled off of him and sat up in the extremely low cave. "Well enough." Her eyes got big for a second before she turned an interrogating eye to the boy. "And you? Did you sleep at all, Naruto?" He chuckled and awkwardly shifted into a crouch. "Yes, ma'am." I'm rested and ready to go. I promise. She nodded and turned to ready their packs. Good. We need to get to the tower without encountering anyone, so you need to be in top form. My leg is still a little off. Naruto shifted around to the mouth of their cave hole and peeked out the camouflage sheet and through the roots. That's fine. Just means I get to carry you some more, any? Sakura made a soft TSK noise, but it was in jest. Truthfully, she was still rather surprised that he didn't count it as a burden. She shook her head, chalking it up to his crush on her. Those clones of his certainly didn't hurt. Naruto sent out some of those very clones to survey the area and folded up his camouflage sheet. The clones came back when they were finished getting ready to leave, and one of them picked Sakura up. Ready to go, Sakura-chan? Naruto asked, once again carrying the packs. She nodded from the clone's arms, and they set off. Spectral. Spectral. Sasuke glowered at the girl as he waited. It technically wasn't her fault, but as she was the only living thing nearby, his irritation was directed straight at Kin. She, however, didn't seem to notice, leaning against a tree and fingering a senbon. That was another thing that irked him. He had only bad memories of senbon due to that ice bitch in Wave, and he automatically disliked anyone who used them because of it. A few times he'd had to squash the urge to gouge out her eyes with a real weapon, like a Fuma shuriken or something. Still, even his own focused mind could not ignore her physical attractiveness. Once Itachi was dead, perhaps Kin might make decent breeding cattle for the resurrection of his clan. He had no time to continue that thought, as a voice suddenly called out to them. A very creepy voice. Ah, Kin-san, you've managed to bring Sasuke-kun to me. Did he come willingly? Sasuke redirected his glare to the newcomer. No sound was made at their arrival, and Sasuke hadn't sensed him whatsoever. If this was the man that was to give him the power he was promised, he was already looking forward to it. Although he could do without the very unnerving stare the long-haired man was giving him, Kin nodded and pushed off of the tree.
Hi, Orochimaru-sama.
I was a little surprised at how easily he betrayed his team, but it worked out in the end. A loudmouth died, and Zaku and Dosu got something to play with. She paused, frowning. Come to think of it, where are those two? They should have been here by now. Orochimaru chuckled. Sasuke immediately knew this was a madman from the sound, but he couldn't deny the dark power hidden beneath the surface. Oh, I found them on my way here. You don't have to worry. Kukuku. They're dead. Kin gasped and took a step back. You mean you? Orochimaru looked offended, if possible. Of course not. They did their job well. They've not once failed me in their short careers. No, I found them with the extra holes already installed. He smiled, and Sasuke got a little excited. That smile promised something. If it was a fight, then Sasuke would get to prove his strength against a Chūnin. If it was something else, Sasuke could think of at least one thing that would be in his favor at the moment. Orochimaru walked forward across the clearing, and Sasuke could feel Kin freeze and sink into herself, trying to appear small. That wasn't very like the girl as far as he had known her. Clearly, she was afraid of her master. Now, Sasuke-kun, you know why you are here. I will grant you power beyond your imagining. I would like to make a few things clear. I will give you this power. I will help you with your goal of killing your brother. I will even take you away from this wretched village full of morons and train you myself. Sasuke was particularly gleeful at that last one. However, when the time comes, I will have your body. Sasuke's eyes widened in surprise and confusion, as well as a bit of fear and disgust. I wish to be eternal, immortal. I wish to be the only one with this power. One day, when your body is ready and you have accomplished your goals, I will be the one inhabiting it. You may, of course, try to resist. You can deny all of this right now, but I will be placing my mark on you today. You will receive the power you were promised. And even if you deny me now, you will seek me out one day for control over that power. And if you resist when it is ultimately time for me to have your body, well. His smile turned foul and terrifying. his teeth seeming razor-sharp as a long, disgusting tongue crept out and wet the pearly knives. A wave of fear paralyzed Sasuke, a vision of him dying painfully flashing across his mind, gone as fast as it arrived. "I'd like to see you try." Sasuke, released from the killer intent, took a few breaths and only a moment to answer. "Give me this power." Spectral. Spectral. Naruto, Sakura, and the clones stayed in the higher canopy, avoiding the ground and any traps that might be in place there. Sakura's idea, obviously. The new appendages didn't come with a boost in intelligence, unfortunately. Regardless, they made good time as the sun rose, growing closer to the tower with each leap. The problem was that they were being followed. Normally, being aware of such a thing would make things easier on them. Obviously, they just had to find some way of setting up an ambush for their pursuers, likely making use of Naruto's clones, and either take them out entirely or otherwise dissuade them from chasing him and Sakura anymore. Slight issue with that, though, they tried. And each time, Naruto's clones had been somehow completely bypassed without ever having so much as seen their adversary. It was really starting to irritate him if he was honest, and Sakura seemed to be getting worried. She was just about to suggest another plan of action when a kunai came up from behind and embedded itself in the tree they had just been about to land on. When Naruto saw the paper attached to the knife, he almost panicked. But something threw him off. "That's not an explosive tag." He allowed himself to land on the branch as normal while his clone angled its skeletal wings to glide to another perch, keeping Sakura safe if something happened. Naruto could survive a single explosive tag. Sakura in her current state might not, and even if she did, the clone holding her would be dispelled and she would fall to the forest floor. He stood above the kunai, looking at the paper with suspicion. It certainly wasn't any kind of explosive, though it was a seal in a sense. It was the Konoha seal, the stylized swirling leaf that they all wore on their Hittite. Someone had drawn the leaf symbol on a piece of paper and thrown it at them. When their pursuers caught up to them in the next few moments due to his stopping, it became clear as to why. They were trying to announce that they were from Konoha. Naruto turned on the branch to regard the team that had been chasing them, his tail swishing through the air in a flourish as he did so. "What do you guys want, Databeo?" They'd have to forgive him for his blunt and cold attitude. He hadn't really had the best couple of days, to be sure. Sure enough, they didn't seem the least put out by his demeanor. One of the males simply stared with his pupilless, cream-white eyes before speaking. "I wanted to know what was going on with your team. Lee and I were both curious as to how you had been handling the test." Hyuga Niji took a pointless glance around. His Byakugan was active for Pete's sake. "Ignoring Haruno-san's obvious injury and your obvious physical changes, I cannot help but notice that Uchiha-san is not here, and hasn't been for at least as long as we have been tracking you." To his credit, Naruto did not immediately put a hole in the tree at the mention of his ex-teammate's name. Instead, he merely set his jaw as his tail thrashed a bit more violently for a moment before resuming its normal swaying. In the most matter-of-fact and cold tone anyone present had ever heard from him, he answered the unspoken question. "He literally stabbed me in the back and abandoned us while I almost died." His comment was accompanied by a swish of his tail and a brief flexing of his wings. He had the forethought to exclude the details about what Sakura had endured. That was her monster to face. It wasn't his place to talk about it with others. "The girl of Niji's group, I think her name is Tenten or something?" gasped loudly, looking between Naruto and Sakura, shock very clear in her eyes. The other boy, Rock Lee, widened his eyes before they closed and he shook his head, muttering most unyouthful under his breath. If Niji was shocked by the news, he didn't show it. And since Naruto didn't seem to want to expound on the details, Niji wasn't dumb enough to try and force the issue. "Then he is a fool and he will earn his due punishment at the end of the exam," he said simply as though it were the most reasonable response. Naruto just scoffed, an odd noise coming from the usually boisterous blonde. "Yeah, keep dreamin'. He or somebody kissing his ass will make up some lame excuse and he'll get out of it scot-free, all because of his fucking heritage." Niji raised an eyebrow, but seemed to think about it. Naruto didn't know what was going through the other teen's head. but eventually the clear-eyed boy nodded. Indeed. There was a pause. Then, I understand your frustration, Naruto-san. His betrayal aside, the special treatment of our high-born peers is disgusting. Another pause, in which Naruto slowly scanned Neji and his female teammate, trying to determine their fighting styles from their gear and stances. He wasn't doing a very good job of it, not without the experience needed for such an analysis. He thought the girl might use something to do with genjutsu. Lee spoke next, his eyes sad. I do not know why he would do that, but Naruto-kun, what exactly has happened to you? Naruto flinched. It was only a moment, but Lee briefly sounded accusing before it became clear that he was just concerned. He hadn't thought about it that way until now. That he had possibly done something wrong by unleashing this power. That it might have been a bad idea. He pushed the thought down and away, leaving it for later or never, whichever came last. Instead, he hastened to answer, making up some pride as he went. Puberty? Who knows, maybe I secretly come from some crazy clan. Nobody knows my parents. Nobody even knows who I am or where I came from. Tabeo. For all I know, this is normal for an Uzumaki. He grinned at the end, allowing himself to believe it for a while. Lee started to mutter another question, but Neji cut him off. Unlikely, but as fair an assumption as anything else. Now that the not-so-pleasantries are out of the way, I am required to ask if you intend to fight us. Be warned that you will surely lose if you do. Naruto frowned and glared at him. Hey, you're the ones who were following us, we should be asking that. Tabeo, and what the hell do you mean that we'll lose? The bun-haired girl, Naruto was sure her name was Tenten, interjected, seemingly trying to defuse the situation. And Neji was talking about your team disadvantage. You're down one and another is injured. She chuckled nervously for a moment. Even if you used those weird, solid clones, you'd still be just one person, one style up against three. Neji spoke again before Naruto could respond. I was telling the truth earlier. We were curious to what was going on with your team in the state that it is. We have both of our scrolls, and I doubt you truly want to risk fighting us for them. Naruto clenched his fist at being told that he had little to no chance. But a glance at Sakura reminded him of their predicament and he backed down. Besides, we already have both scrolls too, so I guess there's no reason to fight right now. But mark my words, if you throw a challenge like that at me again, I'll put your head in the ground, Databeo. Whether Neji knew what the challenge he had apparently issued was or not, he smirked anyway. I look forward to testing that, Naruto-san. And with nary a bow nor a wave, Team Guy leapt away back into the trees, cutting a wide berth and apparently taking a less direct route to the tower before Naruto lost sight of them. He took a mental 10 count before breathing out slowly, turning to look at Sakura again and smiling. See? I can be diplomatic. Sakura rolled her eyes a little and gave him a withering smile. Yes, Naruto. I can see you handled that brilliantly. Naruto rubbed his nose and grinned, happy with the half-joking praise. Can we move on now? Every moment we stay out here is another moment that my leg is swelling and not getting treatment. Naruto turned serious in an instant and nodded. He and his Bunshin sharing a look before they each started heading towards the tower again. The emotional switch almost gave Sakura whiplash as she stared at the side of the original's face from the clone's arms. Something had definitely changed in the blonde, beneath and beyond the obvious. As she thought about it, she wasn't even sure it was entirely Sasuke's betrayal that was causing it. It was part of it, obviously, but something else was eating at him. It had almost since he had left her with his clones to talk to the Suna team. Did they say something to unnerve him? Or was he still worried about her knowing of his guest? She'd have to talk to him once they were safe and had some privacy. As the only, in her mind, remaining members of Team 7, they had to stick together. And with that thought, she was forced to admit that she had also changed. Sasuke, the Uchiha that she thought she knew, she wasn't even sure he had ever existed now. For weeks he had been growing colder, crueler, angrier. And her eyes now opened as they were. She couldn't seem to find her fantasy in the real thing. Not in the past and certainly not now. Not when she could look at Naruto, see the rage and frustration, the pain and the hate in his grinding jaw, and feel the exact same things in herself. Naruto had worried about this, she could see that now. Perhaps not to this degree, but he had been having doubts about Sasuke lately. It was so obvious in his eyes, the more she looked. They were filled with the kind of regret that someone who, having expected or at least suspected a tragedy, didn't act in time to prevent it. She couldn't help herself. Her mouth opened and the words tumbled out before she could blink. "It's not your fault, Naruto." He twitched his head to look at her, one skeletal wing adjusting and angling to land properly on the next branch without losing his momentum. "Huh? What are you talking about, Sakura-chan?" She took a half a second to decide her words this time. "You can't blame yourself for what happened. Whether you had been able to fight him or not, he'd still have betrayed us. He took the first opportunity, Naruto. You did everything you could and more." Naruto's eyes were downcast, not looking terribly convinced. He struggled with his voice for a moment. I show. "We'll talk later, Naruto. Now isn't the place, I know." "I'm sorry," she said, looking away, feeling as though she had made him feel worse. He quickly wiped away that feeling, though. "And no, it's okay. Thanks, Sakura-chan." He gave her that honest smile she had recently discovered, her own face brightening when she saw the real gratitude on his. They continued in a mostly comfortable silence the rest of the way, each one left to their own thoughts as they navigated the canopy. Spectral. Are we supposed to open them now?" Sakura nodded, seeing nothing else to do. "I think so. We made it here, so." Naruto carefully peeled open the seal on the heaven scroll, wary but excited. When nothing bad immediately happened, he continued unrolling it, watching with confusion as some strange glyph-like lines were revealed, leading to and from a large blank spot in the middle. He looked at Sakura in confusion. "I don't think I get it." She wriggles a moment, wincing imperceptibly when her too-tight shirt pinches under her arms. "Here, let me down. I can stand at least." The clone quickly obliged, remaining remarkably quiet considering who made it. Sakura stood gingerly, resting most of her weight on her right leg to keep the injured one from complaining. She held the earth scroll in her hands and pulled it open. Inside was an almost identical copy of the other one. Looking between the two, her eyes slowly widened. "It's a seal, Naruto." Lay them down crossing each other, overlapped the two blank spaces. As she handed him the other scroll, he hastened to do so while Sakura leaned against his clone. Once he was done, he backed up to stand next to her while the seal seemed to start glowing, a new kanji writing itself into the blank space. Sakura took a quick glance at the original Naruto and gasped. "Naruto, your bones, put them away." "Huh? Why, Sakura-chan? A ninja should keep his secrets as long as possible. Plus, the less they ask about yesterday, the better off I'll be." She hoped he would get the message, but whether he did or not, he still complied. With an almost whispered rattling tinkle, the wings and tails of both Narutos retracted, vanishing from sight and receding into his body. Almost as soon as he did, the kanji finished filling itself in, briefly spelling out man before a column of smoke popped from the seal, dispersing to reveal Irika-sensei. "Oof. Hello to you too, Naruto." Sakura smiled when her teammate all but glomped their former teacher, but quickly cleared her throat to get Naruto's attention, giving him a soft but meaningful look. He understood and let go of Irika, stepping back to stand next to her, his smile still present but muted. Irika smiled at them, ignoring the presence of the Kage Bunshin. "Naruto, Sakura, congratulations. I am so proud of you for making it here and retrieving those scrolls." Naruto frowned, anticipating the next few words and deciding it would be better to present the information first like Sakura had suggested on their way here. "Irika-sensei, there's something we need to tell you about Sasuke." Irika stopped smiling immediately, as though it were a mask that had dropped. "We know Naruto. We got the report in a little while ago. Spectral. Spectral. / repeat. Orochimaru is I in the forest over. / I've got you now, you bastard. Racing through the trees, she ignored the pain in her shoulder as she caught a brief sight of her prey traveling perpendicular to her. She angled slightly to cut them off, resulting in them all stopping, the opposing sides facing off. Mitarashi Anko kept her guard up as she took mental stock of the two genin her old master had with him. Tsuchikin and Uchiha Sasuke? So, that's your game, is it, Orochimaru? You're after the Sharingan, then? Her first words since intercepting them, and she sounded amused. Orochimaru chuckled darkly. Cool. Anko-chan, Kin-chan, take Sasuke-kun to the Delta hideout. I'll follow along later. Spectral. Irika shook his head.
I'm sorry, Naruto. Sakura.
Nobody was able to catch or stop him. He's left the village and branded himself a traitor. He prepared for the outburst, the argument, but it didn't come. Well, an outburst did. Good! Naruto and Sakura both shouted, fully united on this subject by now. Naruto took up the conversation when their previous teacher looked confused, his face set in a scowl. That bastard literally stabbed me in the back, and I would have died if not for, well, certain reasons. Irika assumed exactly what Naruto wanted him to and nodded, not requiring any further explanation. That didn't excuse his shock, though. He stabbed you. Sakura, her eyes already growing wet at the thought, shouted out now. And he left me to get RA-. She choked on the word, her body shivering for a moment before Naruto quickly threw his arm around her, hugging her sideways and rubbing her shoulder. Surprisingly to the males present, she just gently wiped her eyes on his shoulder and stayed there, not speaking anymore. Naruto turned back to glare at Irika, daring him to question that one. Irika, though, wasn't stupid. That was no act, not from either of them. Having taught them both for their entire academy years, he knew them fairly well. Then again, he thought he knew Sasuke, too. Irika straightened his back, every year of his career fueling and supporting his posture. I need to tell some higher-ups about this. Some questions also need to be asked and answered regarding your place in these exams now. Seeing them crestfallen again, he smiled and relaxed a bit. Congratulations again on making it this far. And so quickly, even with such a damaged team. Whether you two end up qualifying for the third exam or not, what you've done here is still an accomplishment to be admired. If you go up these stairs, you'll enter the tower proper. There are rooms all over. Feel free to take a couple of empty ones and rest up. A medic Nin will be around tonight to make sure you're not going to die before the test is over. But they aren't permitted to really heal you. He saw their grimaces and glanced down at Sakura's splinted and purpled leg. Sorry, Sakura. I'll see if I can at least get a brace for that. And with that, Irika vanished in another puff of smoke, leaving the two, plus clone, alone. Naruto turned towards her as she lifted her head to look at him, her eyes drying again. Let's go find some place to prop your leg up. It's still swelling a lot. She nodded and reached with her left hand to hold his right shoulder automatically as he bent slightly to pick her up in his arms. The clone dispersed itself, and once again Naruto had to pause as memories that weren't quite his own flooded his mind. That's starting to get annoying. I may have to cut down on the Kage Bunshin. Walking carefully up the stairs, he navigated through a hallway and a door, finding a sort of rest area with couches, tables, and a television monitor. He walked right past and through a doorway, finding yet more stairs to climb. Here he found a floor with halls and doors, presumably the rooms Irika mentioned. Small blackboards were next to all the doors, pieces of chalk resting on them. As they walked, they passed quite a few with X's on them, and weren't sure what to make of those. A couple had a village symbol and a number, or other such name or identifier. One was from Sunagakure, and Naruto and Sakura wondered if it was Gaara's team. Eventually they found a few that seemed to be empty, and after a quick knock to check, Naruto took Sakura into one, the pinkette drawing the leaf symbol under a big number 7 on the board before Naruto closed and locked the door. Inside was a sparsely furnished room. A desk and chair and a double bed. The window had its curtains closed, but the light switch worked, turning on a wall light over the desk and filling the room adequately. Naruto carefully got Sakura onto the bed and finally slipped their packs from his shoulders, setting them down and getting some water out. After they had had a drink, Naruto dragged the chair over to the bed and sat down, sinking in relief. "HAA, we made it." Sakura fiddled with the ties on her splint, the swelling having caused them to dig into her flesh painfully. Upon noticing, Naruto helped her untie it until she sighed on the relaxed pressure, the splint halves falling slack onto the bed. Naruto stared at the swelling, the bruise a blotted black and angry purple. How is it?" She kept her eyes closed and shook her head, relaxing onto the pillow. "It throbs and hurts when anything touches it. I haven't tried actually moving it in a while, but I'm scared to try. I'm afraid I'll black out if I try to walk." She opened her eyes and smiled a little at him. "But I'm sure it'd be a lot worse without you. I wouldn't be here without you. I wouldn't still be a..." Naruto looked away, his face dark. They were quiet for a moment, Sakura's attempted thanks dying on her tongue when the mood changed. Then, suddenly, her eyes snapped to him and widened at his question. "Am I a bad person for killing them?" Sakura answered almost immediately, passionate about her answer. "Absolutely not, Naruto. They tried to. That sort of thing may happen in our line of work, but that doesn't make it right. You did what any other shinobi, no, what any good man would have done if they could." She reached out and held his hand, smiling gratefully again. "You're good, Naruto. You're a good man. Thank you. I don't think I can ever repay you for saving me, for letting me keep my choice." Naruto blushed at the attention. It was honestly more than he had ever gotten. Sure, Sakura-chan. Thanks." She squeezed his hand again, but he wasn't finished yet. "But I was also thinking about that AIM team." Sakura immediately sobered, understanding. Rapists were one thing, but those guys were just another team trying to pass. Still, she couldn't help but feel a bit jaded at the moment. And she was especially affected by Naruto's mood. He shouldn't ever be so grim, she thought. "I don't think you had much choice. They probably would have caused problems for us later if you had let them go, and they were clearly trying to kill us. You have to remember, Naruto, they are the enemy." "We're at peace, Sakura-chan." She shook her head and slightly surprised herself with her next insight. "No, we just aren't in open war. Ino was telling me once about something her dad told her, that the Chūnin exams are a way for all the peaceful nations to vent frustration, flex their muscles, and show off. Our allies are more like people we mutually tolerate. We aren't at war, but we still want to assert and proclaim our power. It's at once a challenge and a warning. That's where the joint Chūnin exams comes in. The villages that visit the host always send their best, to show off what the best of their lowest-ranking shinobi can do. It's also because there are no field promotions." Naruto scrunched his face in confusion, so she explained. "In wartime, a ninja would be promoted on merit in the field. Without a war, there just aren't enough important missions to go around, at least not that we can trust a genin with. So we have the exams to make sure that promotions are still awarded to those that deserve it. I think this part of the exams is supposed to simulate a watered-down version of what it's like to be behind enemy lines, surrounded by opponents while trying to acquire an objective. Everyone is an enemy out there. That's the point." Naruto stared at her and smiled. "Wow, Sakura-chan, you're so smart. I never would have figured that out." She laughed, but brushed it aside in favor of keeping him on track. "But you do get it now, right? AIM is more of a military nation than we are. Those guys might not have ever stopped coming after us if you had let them go." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, still bothers me a little, but I think that's a good thing." She smiled and squeezed his hand. "Yes, it is. It means you're still human, you're still you. Don't ever stop being you." Sakura felt the conversation taper off and shifted her body slightly, trying to get comfortable. But she winced when she moved her injured leg, and she kept wincing as searing hot knives spread through her leg even after she froze. Naruto hurried to open his pack and pull out a spare pair of pants, rolling them up and saying, "We should elevate that, right? I'll need to lift it, Sakura-chan." The pinkette groaned in both pain and the expectation of pain. "Just give me something to squeeze." He shifted from the chair to sitting on the bed to make it easier for him, inadvertently putting his leg in reach of Sakura. She quickly took advantage and grasped onto his knee, squeezing already in anticipation. He winced, but said nothing as he gingerly held her heel with on hand, slowly lifting it until he could slide the roll of pants under her ankle. The pressure on his knee increased dramatically, to the point where he knew it was bruised, but still he said nothing. It was, after all, nothing in comparison to dying. Once her leg was settled again and he made sure it wouldn't roll to either side, her grip lessened immensely. He turned to look at her and saw her letting go of her pillow, having obviously turned to bite it and muffle her screams. He admired her strength. Sakura looked back up at him, panting but thankful. It stopped throbbing so hard. "Thank you, Naruto-san." She chuckled breathlessly. "I seem to be thanking you a lot lately. I really owe you." Naruto tried to smile, but his forehead was still creased, and he started fidgeting. He looked away from Sakura's eyes and down at his hands, deep in thought. Sakura's face twisted in worry. Had she made him upset? Or had she reminded him of what had been bothering him lately? She glanced at the door and deemed it sealed enough. They likely wouldn't be overheard. "Naruto, what's wrong? Something's been eating at you for a while, and I know it's more than just the Uchiha." Naruto was startled that she had noticed, and even more surprised by the way she addressed their former teammate. But he supposed she appeared to have been on the same page as him for a while now. He looked away again, clenching his fists and thinking through his words. "Everything's changing." He paused and she didn't interrupt. "Sasuke's gone. He was always a dick, but now he's a traitor and he's gone. This new power I have, I don't know what it is, Tabeo. I don't know how it got into me, and I don't even know if there's more it can do." While she was still lost for words, he rushed on, trying to get it all out at once. "And you've changed, too. You're being so much nicer and quiet. You've been trusting me a lot and taking me seriously. We've been talking and you haven't hit me yet. I'm not complaining. It's just different. I'm not really sure what to do anymore." Sakura was stunned, to say the least. She could see her silence making him more uncomfortable, so she quickly cleared her throat and tried to answer his implied question. Wow, I guess I have, huh?" She thought about it, trying to understand this realization herself. Well, she had been thinking some things recently. "I've been feeling like I want to be closer to you. Like it's really important that we stick together, you know?" He watched her as she fumbled through her thoughts, understanding what it was like. "I mean, my parents were never really excited for me to be a kunoichi, and I guess I never took it seriously because of that. And now a big part of my reason to be one is gone. Turned out to be a literal backstabbing bastard. So, I had been wondering a bit why I should continue. Seeing you fight, though, the way you protected me, I wanted to do that. I want to protect people, to keep the kinds of things that happen to you, that almost happened to me. I want to prevent those things from happening to others. I want," she realized, a tone of surprise entering her voice, "to teach, I want to teach people to protect themselves." She looked up at his sapphire eyes, her own emerald orbs wide and wet. "And I want you and I to stay together. My parents don't support me. My best friend turned my other friends against me and became my rival." She silently reminded herself to talk to Ino before word got out about Sasuke. It would be easier to hear it from her. "My crush betrayed us and left the village. I've only got you left, Naruto." She let go of his hand to reach up and dry her eyes, reining in her emotions. "We've got to stick together. If you can promise you'll always be here for me, Then I promise the same. Naruto was dumbstruck, honestly. He felt a pain in his chest from just how much pain she was in, but he was also feeling so elated, more than a teammate, more than a friend. She wanted to be his partner. And he was only too excited to agree. I promise, Sakura-chan. I give you my word. Do you know what my nindo is? She shook her head, already smiling broadly. I never go back on my word. That is my nindo, my ninja way. She giggled a little at his super serious face. That's a good nindo, Naruto. Okay, then I won't either. I promise too, Naruto-kun. I give my word. Naruto grinned and lifted his right arm to her, tilting it to the side so it crossed his chest. She smiled and did the same, their wrists colliding and locking together in their oath. A knock at the door made them jump slightly, but they relaxed when a voice called through asking if anyone needed medical attention. Naruto stood and called an affirmative, unlocking the door and letting the man in. Almost 20 minutes later and he had left, apologizing again that he couldn't do more. Naruto closed and, as an afterthought, locked the door again. Sakura looked at the bandages, new plastic splint and compression brace wrapped around her left leg. Well, it's throbbing again. Doesn't really hurt, though. Naruto came back over and sat on the chair, also observing the wrappings. At least it was only a fracture, right? She nodded, thankful for that. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to walk in a week, she said, almost echoing what the medic Nin had told them. What are you going to do about the third task? Sakura could tell that he was nervous about asking. It really was sweet how he was being so careful with her emotions, but she was tougher than that. It'll have to depend on what it is and when. I might still be able to, or I might be well enough to participate by the time it happens. We still have 2 days before the second task is over. Remember? Naruto nodded. Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, whatever it is, we'll take care of it together, right? She smiled and nodded emphatically. Yeah, together. The conversation from there moved to the other teams in the competition, but there was only one non-Konoha team that they really knew anything about. I don't really think Gaara is that bad, Sakura-chan. He seemed reasonable when I talked to him, Tebeo. Creepy and a little unstable, but basically okay. Sakura shook her head and worried her lip. I'm not so sure. I don't know. There's just something about him that doesn't feel safe. Naruto shrugged. Well, what about his teammates? Supposedly they're all siblings, right? That's what Kabuto-san said, yeah. And I don't know. The Kabuki boy seems mean, and the sister seems bossy. Other than that, I think they're scared of their brother. Naruto had to agree there. Yeah, they did, huh? Maybe. We should watch out for him. He thought back to his encounter in the forest, still convinced that Gaara could be reasoned with if it came down to it. His thoughts wandered and he blushed as he remembered the thank you kiss Sakura had given him shortly after that. It was so soft and brief and gentle. I can't believe my first real kiss was with Sakura-chan. Yada. Sakura noticed his red and excited face, quirking an eyebrow. What are you thinking about now? He snapped out of his thoughts and panicked. And nothing. Just something that happened earlier. He scratched his cheek in embarrassment, not making eye contact and still blushing. Sakura got a sly expression on her face, suddenly feeling like teasing him. Oh? And what was it, Naruto? She had a pretty good idea of the general topic, but couldn't be sure. Were you thinking about me naked? She finished quickly, grinning teasingly at him. He recoiled and waved his hands about. And oh.
No, Isuya, Tabayu.
You. He calmed down and looked away. You were vulnerable. I could never think about that time in that way. Her smile softened and she took his hand in hers, making him look at her. That's sweet, Naruto. Thank you, but that still begs the question of what you were thinking about. Just when he thought he was safe, he started sweating again. Ah. Deciding it was probably best to just tell her when she was in this mood, he sighed. I was thinking about that kiss. She blushed, but quirked her eyebrow. Oh yeah? trying to think of a way to get another one. Huh. Surprisingly, he didn't freak out again. Just calmly shook his head. Not really. Just how nice it was. It was my first kiss. That counted anyway, he added in a huff, still angry. Sakura giggled, knowing what he was referring to. Still, she couldn't help but tease him some more. Yet Sasuke was a forbidden topic at the moment. So, well, I would hardly say that one I gave you counted either, Naruto. She watched his jaw fall open in shock, a comical despair falling over his face. It was hardly more than a peck, you know? Nope, sorry. I guess you'll just have to find a way to get a better one. She really wasn't sure why she kept teasing him like this, almost leading him on. She could admit that she had some feelings for him. It was only natural, after all, with all he had done and the way he had been acting lately. She was worried, however, about how much of it was just her attraction to Sasuke latching onto another target. She'd brought it up at the time, but wasn't that exactly what she was doing? No, she decided. At least not completely. Maybe that was some of it, but she was genuinely wanting Naruto around. He made her feel safe, wanted, cared for. For a lot of reasons, some of them worse than others, but they were still reasons. And that was enough for her. Maybe they'd work out, maybe she loved him. She knew, in hindsight only, that she didn't really love Sasuke. Maybe if he hadn't defected, betrayed them, even if he hadn't grown any warmer to her, she thought that maybe her crush would develop into real love just by working with him long enough. But she didn't have that chance, and she was glad for it. If she had truly loved him and only learned later who he really was, she knew she'd be broken beyond repair. So she pushed him from her mind. From now on, he was a traitor, a liar. He meant nothing to her. She didn't even want to go after him. Fuck Uchiha Sasuke. He was just another enemy now, and she couldn't be happier. She had a real teammate, a partner, to look after her. And said partner was currently looking at her, shocked and still a little upset, but mostly confused. She worried that maybe she had been too obvious, that he would call her out on her bluff before she really knew the answer herself. But it turned out all right, for Naruto just grinned and said, "Haha, I guess I will, Databeo." She just smiled, relieved and a little excited, but said nothing. "I look forward to seeing how you win me over, Naruto-kun." Unbidden, a yawn forced its way out of her mouth and Naruto stood up. "Yeah, we should get to sleep. We've still got a couple days before anything will happen. We can talk more tomorrow if you want." He said it like a statement, but it was more of a question. She nodded, starting to smile but yawning again instead. "Yeah, we will. Thank you again, Naruto-kun, for everything." He blushed a little, but grinned his big foxy grin and nodded. "Anything, Sakura-chan. Good night, I'll see you tomorrow." "Good night, Naruto-kun." She liked how it felt on her lips, if she was honest. Naruto collected his pack and opened the door, giving her a wave before leaving. But as the door was closing, Sakura felt a sense of dread, cold, panicking dread. She squirmed and her breathing accelerated. And when the door finally latched, she couldn't stay calm. "Naruto!" He burst back into the door, eyes wide and scanning the room. Finding nothing out of place, he looked at Sakura, worried. She was crying. She didn't know when they had come, but amidst the shaking and the scared breaths, her tears were already streaming down her face. They both stared at each other for a moment until Naruto started to speak. "Sakura dash. Don't leave me alone," she rushed. Her eyes darted back and forth to look into each of his, suddenly very aware that she was about to be alone in that room. "I don't want to be alone," she said in a much smaller voice, ending in a choked-off sob. Immediately he closed and relocked the door, setting his pack on the floor again and kicking off his sandals. "I won't, Sakura-chan." He sat down in the chair, eyes still wide in surprise but plainly seeing that now was not the time to question her. "I'll be right here when you wake up. Okay? I promise." Those two words calmed her immediately, her eyes stopping their flow to let her shed tears dry, and her body stilled, no longer shaking. She took a few deep breaths and nodded, smiling a little. "Okay, thank you, Naruto-kun."
I'm sorry.
He shook his head. No, you don't have to be sorry. I get it, Tabeo. Trust me. I do, she answered immediately, knowing it was true. They smiled again, feeling their new bond tightening. They said goodnight again, and Naruto slouched in the chair, crossing his arms and tucking his chin to his chest to sleep. Sakura closed her eyes, and the room was silent save for their breathing. For all of 20 minutes. Sakura's eyes opened again and she sighed. Even with Naruto there, she couldn't sleep. She looked over at him and bit her lip. Could she? Before they'd had no choice, but now, well, the bed was big enough, right? He just has to lay next to me, that's all. Then I can sleep. Besides, I'm sure he's uncomfortable like that. Even as she rationalized and convinced herself that it was okay, that she just needed a little bit more to sleep, her hand was already reaching out to shake his leg, softly calling his name. He twitched and drifted back to consciousness with her continued efforts. And Sakura-chan, what is it? Is it time to get up already? She shook her head, blushing despite her rationalizing. And no, I can't sleep. See, could you lay here with him? She finished, rushing and not making eye contact. She could still see as he snapped awake, also blushing and shocked. Are you sure, Sakura-chan? Why? She pouted, not really wanting to discuss it right now. I slept well when we were next to each other those times. Please, Naruto-kun, just in the same bed. I'm sure I could sleep then. He nodded after a moment. Sure, Sakura-chan. He stood and unzipped his jacket, letting it fall to the floor. Sakura shifted further to the wall, feeling slight pain as she moved her leg, but finding it at least easier to do with her new wrappings. He laid down next to her on her right and looked at her. Like this. Already she felt herself relaxing. Seriously? Okay. You're falling way too hard. Her inner thoughts aside, she smiled and nodded, turning her head and lacing her fingers with his. Yeah, thank you, Naruto-kun. Good night again. Good night, Sakura-chan. In hardly a minute, Sakura's breathing slowed and regulated. Naruto lay awake for a while longer, watching her content sleeping face and thinking. She was being clingy. He kind of liked it, but it was still different than normal. He found that he really wasn't against any of it, really. He thought it was cute, the way she wanted to rely on him like this, but he hoped that she would stop teasing him so much. He wondered if this would become the norm for them. As he easily drifted off to sleep, stroking her hand with his thumb, he had one last thought. Everything's changing, and I think I like it. Jan. Sakura awoke suddenly and seemingly without reason. She moved to sit up out of habit, only to wince and freeze when the movement caused a startling jolt to run up and down her leg. She slowly laid back down, the events of the last few days catching up to her awakening mind. She wondered why she had woken up so suddenly, and was then aware that Naruto, whom she distinctly remembered going to sleep with, wasn't there, and she had a broken leg. And she was alone. Just like last night, her heart accelerated, but before she could truly panic, the door opened and the very guy she wanted to see walked in. "Where'd you go?" she asked in a rush, her embarrassment building as her voice cracked. He jumped at her voice, not yet realizing she was awake. "Oh, take the bathroom." He collected himself and stood up straighter, closing the door behind him more out of habit than anything else. "Oh heyo, Sakura-chan." She smiled, her heart already calm again.
Ohayo, Naruto-kun.
She fought the slight blush, but grinned a little bigger when Naruto failed to hide his. He sat down on the chair next to the bed and awkwardly fiddled with his fingers. How'd you sleep?" She sighed before she could hold it back and allowed a little smile to grace her round face. "Oh, wonderful. My leg didn't bother me at all, and I actually had some pretty good dreams." Once again, she barely held back the blush as she recalled said images. "Or at least it feels like I did. I don't remember them." Thankfully, Naruto was too busy scratching his forearm to notice her lie. "Yeah, I usually don't bother to remember my dreams. They're always really weird, Databeo. Sakura was tempted to ask, but was suddenly paranoid that the topic would be pushed back onto her, so she let it go, stretching her upper body as she carefully sat up. A yawn bubbled up from her chest before she asked what they were supposed to do now. The blonde shrugged and wisely avoided getting caught watching her too tight spare clothes stretch across her chest and lift off of her stomach. Well, we're supposed to wait until the exam is fully over, right? And then they'll announce the next stage. Sakura nodded, seeing his point. There really wasn't much to do at this stage. So, have you found out anything about who's already here? Naruto scratched his arm again and shook his head. No, I didn't see anybody while I was out, but I think Kiba's team is here. I passed a barking door on my way back. Hehe. Sakura smiled gently, glad to hear of their classmates' success. Well, at least we won't be the only team from Konoha to get here, then. That'd be embarrassing. They shared a quiet laugh at that, and then settled into a comfortable silence. Sakura took note of Naruto's seemingly nervous tension, however, and frowned. Naruto, is something wrong? The blonde looked up and cocked his head. What do you mean, Sakura-chan? She nodded towards his arms and pointed out that he had been scratching them for a while. He looked down at them as though for the first time, puzzled. I didn't notice. They've just been itchy. Even as he spoke, he was pushing his left sleeve up his arm, and they both gasped at the irregular studs of diamond pushing their way up through his skin. Naruto hurried to take his jacket off, revealing the studs and small spikes going most of the way up both of his arms, looking like they were spreading to his shoulders. What's even happening to me? Sakura was similarly worried, but forced herself to remain calm. Thoughts raced through her head, but she wouldn't get anywhere without more information. Could it be because of, she asked, her tone clearly suggesting what she meant. Naruto gaped at her. Kyuubi? Well, he's never done anything like this before. And besides, I rejected his help. Maybe it's more of that other power? Like with his wings and his tail, he concentrated and pulled. Lo and behold, the studs shrank down, sinking beneath his skin and vanishing. Sighing in relief, he smiled at Sakura. Phew, I was really worried there, Databeo. Sakura, however, was more excited. Naruto, try and bring them out. At his confused look, she rolled her eyes. Come on, think. If this power keeps growing on its own, who knows what you could do if you tried. They were coming through slowly on their own. Try pushing it all out at once. A thought came to her at the last second and she specified, slowly. If it's dangerous or big, you'll need to keep an eye on it. Agreeing wholeheartedly, Naruto focused and pushed on the feeling he could no sense under his skin. Starting down at the back of his hands, rugged diamond plating started growing out from his skin, spreading around his wrists and all the way up to his shoulders, straining the sleeves of his black shirt. His knuckles became like studded plates, sharp diamond encasing his fingertips. Turning his arms around to observe the spread, he saw that innumerable tiny studs were coating his palms, retaining with some effort most of their mobility while providing armor. Naruto and Sakura both shared a grin. The young girl said giddily, Naruto, if you could make this happen all over, imagine the kind of defense you could mount. Even as his black shirt bulged with more diamond plating growing out from his body, conforming and taking the shape of his actual muscles, a single smooth spike of the gem-like substance was growing out from the tops of his wrists, extending forward along his fists like spears. Naruto mentally stopped the emergence when the spikes were over 2 feet long and his shirt was running out of room to stretch. I think this has a lot more potential than just defense, he muttered, examining the claws and wrist spikes. On closer inspection, the golden fluid-like stuff in his wings and tail was also present in the long, thin spears, softly glowing and subtly flowing. All the worry from before about unexpected advancements in this new power were forgotten. For the rest of the day, aside from meals, they discovered much about Naruto's abilities. Once he had stripped down to his pants and coated his whole body in diamond, Sakura had likened his appearance to some mythical specter. The two short horns that grew from his diamond-plated forehead were both handsome and intimidating, and the way it made his cerulean eyes and golden pupils glow were impressive. Sakura had privately wondered whether the muscular appearance of the diamond was simply inherent, or if it was actually mimicking Naruto's real muscles, mostly hidden under his baby fat and skin as they were. With his wings and tail extended and flexing with his every move, his specter form, as Sakura had been calling it in her head, was making her feel sufficiently hot as much as part of her thought it looked terrifying. As the day wore on, they discussed a variety of topics, from Sakura's thoughts on what the third task might be to Naruto's connection to the Kyuubi. The fourth night came around and found them in the same bed again. Sakura was able to remain calm while Naruto ventured out for food, but wasn't certain she'd be without nightmares if he left in the night. Plus, if she was honest with herself, she was guiltily enjoying his presence. But before they could sleep, there was the minor issue that Sakura's clothes were becoming significantly stale. Naruto had been able to change periodically and keep his clothes from getting too filthy all at once, but Sakura had just the one outfit after her dress was ripped apart. And so it was that her shirt and shorts, along with the dirtiest set of Naruto's jumpsuit, were put in a washing machine down the hall. They lay on the bed, Naruto in a pair of pants and Sakura trying not to fidget in just her white undergarments. Thanks for helping me out of my sea clothes. Anything to help. Eventually they managed to relax enough to actually fall asleep, until a minor pain in her leg woke Sakura. She groaned quietly, mindful that Naruto was still sleeping under her. She carefully adjusted her leg properly, what she had clearly tried to do in her sleep, and settled herself back into Naruto's chest to sleep. A moment later, her eyes snapped open again and she stared up at the sleeping boy, her face red. It was at this moment that she also became aware that Naruto's arm had curled under and around her, holding her to him as she laid on it. Thoughts raced furiously through her head, and were promptly discarded when that part of her brain that preferred to think about Naruto pointed out that his body was warm on her half-naked body, and his heartbeat was soothing. And so she went back to sleep, happy again. Spectral. When she next awoke, Sakura watched Naruto sleep for several minutes before stealing a peck from his lips as softly as she could. Satisfied that he hadn't woken from that, she started slowly sliding off of him, disentangling from his arm and being mindful of her leg. "Wake up, Naruto-kun. I think we've slept enough," she said groggily, clearing her sleep-dry throat. Naruto stirred quickly, groaning softly as he woke. "MNNN. Sakura-chan." He rubbed his eyes and looked at her, suddenly remembering her state and blushing.
Oh, Ohio, es Sakura-chan.
Sakura giggled good-naturedly, even as her face and neck heated up from his reaction. "Ohio, Naruto, we should get up. It's the 5th day and someone will probably come by to tell us what's going on eventually." Naruto looked over at the clock on the nightstand, noticing it was already well into the 16th hour of the day. He rubbed the back of his neck and chuckled. Hey, wow, did we really sleep that long? I wonder if... Sakura almost waited for him to finish, but spoke automatically, the thought having also been on her mind. If we'll be allowed to continue. Naruto looked up at her, then nodded with a grunt of confirmation. A red tint soon came upon his face, however, and he looked away and scratched at his cheek. I'll go get your clothes." "Are they dry?" Sakura asked and then immediately felt stupid. Firstly, how would he know, and secondly, they went to bed right after he put them in the wash. Even after all that time, the rolled up and wet clothes couldn't have possibly dried enough to be worn. But then he surprised her again. "Sh should be, yeah. I woke up and made a clone a couple hours ago and had it go move them to an empty dryer. Apparently it had a hell of a time figuring out the machine." The last part was muttered, but Sakura heard it all the same and was immediately curious. "How could you know that, Naruto-kun? I'm almost sure I would have heard you talking to your clone about it and woken up." He cocked his head at her, then grinned that insufferably cute grin. "Oh yeah, I didn't tell you? It seems like, now that I'm better with them, I gain the memories of my clones when they dispel. Her green eyes bulged. That sounded like an extremely useful skill, especially since his Kagebunshin could use jutsu like the henge. Naruto, that's amazing. He picked at his ear and frowned. I guess. It's kind of annoying, actually. I use so many of them, it's been giving me a headache. Especially when their memories are so similar to mine. Like when I made one to carry you. She honestly hadn't thought of that. She supposed that if he hadn't figured out what was going on, he might have accidentally driven himself mad trying to figure out why his memories were so cluttered. I see. Yeah, I guess I understand that. Naruto, with a promise that he'd be back soon, left the room to fetch their laundry. Sakura suppressed the panic that threatened to rise in her, still concerned at how deeply reliant she had become of his presence. She had been able to rein it in twice now, but that had required no small amount of will, and that was when she knew he was going and that he'd be back soon. She shuddered to think how she might react if he was gone unexpectedly again. Hopefully it all would pass, or else some things may become problematic. Occupying herself with thoughts other than the blonde for the sake of her sanity, she slowly, experimentally flexed her ankle. She was suitably shocked at the minor twinge, expecting a much greater reaction. It felt more like pressure than pain at this point, at least compared to how it felt before. Hope surged through her. She might even be able to limp around today. It was curious, though. She really shouldn't be this healed already. Had the medicine from before secretly accelerated the process? Sakura supposed he must have, otherwise she should be biting her hand in pain by now. She'll have to find some way to thank him discreetly. After a few minutes of bending and rolling her knee and ankle, she determined that she had nearly a full range of motion with only a dull ache, and was fairly confident she could walk. She swung her legs off to the side of the bed and was about to test her weight, but Naruto came back into the room, raising his eyebrows at her shifted position. Something up, Sakura-chan? Forgetting about the bag of clothes in his arms for the moment, she beckoned him overexcitedly. Come here, Semir, help me up. My leg barely hurts. I want to try and stand. Naruto almost looked like he was going to argue, but then he put the bag down and stepped over to the side of the bed, wrapping his arm around her upper back and letting her support her arm across his shoulders. You sure about this, Sakura-chan? Instead of answering, she leaned on him slightly as she slid off of the bed, suppressing a shiver as her bare feet hit the cold floor. Standing mostly on her right leg, Sakura slowly eased her weight over to her injured limb, wincing a bit at the dull throbbing. But overpowering the pain was a sense of delight. She was standing on just the one leg, now, slowly letting go of Naruto as she continued to put pressure on the splinted leg. She stood there, using Naruto only for balance as she felt the pain increase over time, quickly lowering her other foot back to the ground. I'm sure this is a lot better than I thought it would be. I won't really be kicking with it or anything, but I'm pretty sure I can walk. Even as she said it, Sakura was taking a tentative walk around the room, putting some extra pep in her steps to test the limits of her injury. Of course, she had no way of knowing the kind of effect this had on Naruto. A mix of shared joy and shock at her recovery with the added arousal of watching Sakura bounce around the room in her underwear. He cleared his throat and fought to look at her face, blushing. That's amazing, Sakura-chan. So, you think you can do the third task? She rolled her eyes and spun around to face him, one hand on her hip. Again, it would depend on what it is. But I will say, this really improves my chances. Sakura wasn't sure if the blush on his face was entirely from her teasing, or if part of it was remembering that she had already said as much. Honestly, she was finding that having a boy you liked actually respond to you positively when you're hardly even trying was a lot more fun than begging and scrounging for every scrap of attention you could get. She figured she understood how Naruto must have felt before a bit better, now, and was a bit guilty at how she had treated him. Still, it wasn't as though she would be throwing herself at him now. Nope, not at all what she had already been doing. She watched as he pulled their clean clothes from the bag and stripped off his own jacket and black shirt, digging around for the set he had just washed. Nope, not yet. Not today, at least. She stifled a giggle at her own thoughts, and very slightly limped over to him, putting her hand on his bare shoulder under the obvious pretense of leaning over beside him to grab her own clothes. She took great delight in the stiffening of his shoulder as her bandage-clad upper body no doubt came into view. Pulling away without a word and an almost unhideable grin, she sat on the bed and began pulling those skin-tight black shorts up her creamy legs, noting with satisfaction that they no longer bothered her injury. Pulling the V-neck fishnet armor over her head, she stood to more easily pull on and fasten the red vest shirt, reminded again that it left her midriff exposed. Naruto had been right, it did look fairly good on her, if decidedly more combat-oriented than her dress. Sakura supposed that was probably a good thing, though she'd have to find something in this vein that fit properly. The vest tugged uncomfortably about her shoulder blades when she moved. They had gotten dressed just in time, as a knock at the door made them both jump and glance at each other. Naruto opened the door to a man in a Chūnin uniform and shades. Team 7. Naruto looked over at Sakura, then back to the Chūnin. What's left of it? The man nodded like he expected the response. You've been cleared to participate in the rest of the exams. By my understanding, you would have been told earlier, but certain complications arose with the official decision on your former teammate. You may want to know he's been marked in the records as a traitor to the village. A bounty has been placed on his head, and he can no longer claim affiliation with Konoha. Sakura scoffed, and Naruto clearly shared her sentiment. Well, I guess not even being an Uchiha can save you from everything. Thank you for telling us. Naruto was about to close the door, a bit rude, but he seemed notably irked by just the subject matter. Sakura moved forward, stopping him. Ooh, what do we do now? The man adjusted his sunglasses. Why? They were indoors. Before answering, that's actually the primary reason I am here. All of the passing teams are being called to the atrium. Bottom level, big area, can't miss it. Once more, Team 7 looked at each other before turning back to the Chūnin and nodding. Thank you, we'll be there shortly, Sakura said, bowing formally. The man gave a small bow in return before walking away, no doubt to the next occupied room to inform its inhabitants. Naruto shut the door for another few moments of privacy and proceeded to gather up the last of his gear, packing his clothes into his bag. Well, I guess the break's over. Back to work. Sakura paused in her own regearing and looked at him.
Naruto-kun.
Something wrong. He shook his head and sighed. It's just, I'm letting the thought of that jerk get to me, that's all. I'm okay, really? He looked up at her and smiled. She could tell it was forced but not pained. He was just angry again, and he'd calm down. She nodded at him and smiled back, understanding. Okay, I get it. He visibly relaxed. She hadn't even realized he had tensed, and slung his pack over his shoulder. Ready to go? She did the same and tapped her good foot on the ground, adjusting her sandals. MHM. Spectral. A preliminary? Now, some of these guys probably just got here. They're exhausted. Naruto looked around at the team from Kusagakure in particular. The red-headed girl in glasses looked ready to collapse. The boys were slightly better off, though the state of their clothes suggested wounds. His eyes flitted back to the front of their assembly as the proctor for the third task, get a cough drop, dude, explained how it would work. Basically, a randomizer would pair them up and they'd fight until one person gave in, was knocked out, or the proctor called the match. Formalities over with, everyone made their way up the stairs to the raised balconies along either wall of the huge atrium, a room Naruto suspected was designed for ceremonial fights. The giant statue of a hand sign at one end kind of tipped him off. As they waited for the signboards high up on one wall to settle on a pair of names, Naruto observed the rest of the teams that passed. As he thought, Gaara's team from Suna was here, all three of them across from him on the other balcony, with most of the other teams giving them a wide berth. Also, as he suspected, Kiba's team was here, standing on the same side as him and looking for all the world like the test had been a piece of cake. Well, Kiba was anyway. Hinata was glancing around like always, and Shino might have been asleep for all he knew. The Ino Shikacho Team 10 was also there, on his balcony. They were quietly bickering, something about whether it was worth it to keep going. Over on the other balcony was Niji's team. Naruto caught the Hyuga's eyes and nodded, receiving a slight nod in response. Next to them was that Kusa team. The redhead was actually slumped against the wall, breathing carefully. Naruto wondered whether their experience had really been so harrowing or if she was just not used to it. A heavy clunk brought his and everyone else's attention to the names on the board. Inuzuka Kiba versus Pinopo Kata. Naruto sighed, having hoped he would be able to fight first. Still, perhaps this would be interesting. Kata turned out to be one of the Kyuzugaku ninja, he and Kiba facing off down on the arena floor. Looking closer, Naruto wasn't sure whether any of the damage to his clothes actually made it to his skin. He didn't look all that hurt, just a bit tired. Naruto's eyes flipped to Kiba when he spoke. "Stay out of this one until I say so, Akamaru. I gotta see if this guy is even worth our time. First." The Kata felt insulted, he didn't show it. Not like it'd make much difference if your little mutt fought, too. He'd just get himself killed, I'm sure. Kiba growled, and a groan could clearly be heard from Kata's female teammate. "Proctor, start the damn match." The sick man, Hey Ape, looked at the two carefully before raising his arm and sharply bringing it down. "Hajime!" Kiba shot forward, fist flying right for the other boy's face. Kata intercepted, grabbing his fist with one hand and his wrist with another. With what had to be practiced skill, Kata used Kiba's own momentum to lend to his counterattack. A twist of his body that swung Kiba around and slammed his back into the ground. Kata disengaged and leapt away, now drawing the tanto blade from his back. Kiba, wincing, got back to his feet and growled at the Kusanin, eyeing the blade and rethinking his strategy. "Okay, so you can think on your feet. Let's see how you handle this." Beast imitation. Applying his chakra, everyone watched as his nails sharpened into claws, his teeth becoming fangs. Dashing forward with a greater amount of speed than he had shown before, he dodged around Kata's swipe, spinning with the movement and driving his elbow into the boy's rib. He went for a follow-up lunge at Kata's throat, but was forced to retreat when Kata flipped the grip on his tanto, nearly driving it into Kiba's stomach. Naruto watched as the fight continued in this vein, fairly impressed by the bout. It seemed that two close combat fighters had been selected, as Kata kept up fairly evenly with Kiba's fast-paced, wild acrobatics. At least, until Kata found a hole in one of Kiba's attacks. Gasps were heard all around as blood went into the air and Kiba staggered back. His hands clutched at his front, where a large slash went from his right hip to his left shoulder, tearing his coat and mesh undershirt and soaking them red. Kiba gasped and fought the panic, keeping his breathing under control. It was pretty bad, but nothing more than a flesh wound. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a small round object, tossing it in the air and calling his dog. Akamaru leapt up and swallowed the treat, landing on Kiba's hunched back. "You're really good. What was your name again?"
Kata.
Pinopo Kata of Kyuzugaku. Naruto noticed that the boy seemed a lot less cocky and disrespectful, which was smart considering the many small claw marks and the black eye he was sporting. Kiba smirked as Akamaru started to growl, his fur standing on end and his skin flushing all over, giving him a red appearance. "Inuzuka Kiba, nice to meet you. Unfortunately, this is where I pretty much win."
Man beast clone jutsu.
And in the next second, there were two feral Kibas, one on top of the other, the lower one sporting a large gash on his front. With naught but a cry, they each leapt forward, splitting and going in for a pincer attack. Within moments, Kata was nearly overwhelmed, unable to fend off both swift fighters at once. Forced to retreat, he threw down a smoke bomb and got out of there, throwing a volley of shuriken into the smoke blindly for good measure. Landing near the hand sign statue, Kata kept his eyes trained on the smoke. With all the suddenness of an elephant crashing through the trees, two giant drill-like whirlwinds of claws and sharp wind burst from the smoke, dispersing it instantly. Kiba's voice called out, "Getsuga, Fong over Fong," as he and Akamaru raced towards Kata in their deadly tornadoes, tearing up the concrete floor along the way. Kata had no hope of defending both, choosing to run. As the two attacks converged on either side of him, he sprinted forward, leaping up and out of the way as Kiba and Akamaru were forced to turn and weave around each other before they collided. But the technique was still going strong, and Kata's shuriken were just being deflected. So, he landed as far as he could from the deadly duo and called out, "I forfeit!" The attack ground to a halt, Kiba staring at Kata like he couldn't believe it. "Wah! You're not even going to try?" Kata shook his head and sheathed his blade, giving the Inuzuka what might have been a smile. "Alone, we're pretty even. I had a chance for a while, especially after I got that last hit in. But once you teamed up with your partner, I had no chance. Like you said, that was the part where you pretty much won." He shook his head again and raised his hands in a shrug. "Why would I let you throw me around the arena until I fell unconscious when I didn't have anything else up my sleeve to turn things around? At least this way we can both keep watching the fights, right?" He grimaced and gestured to the other boy's wound. "Although you really need to get that wrapped up. I sharpen my blade every day." Kiba paused, then barked out a laugh, Akamaru turning back into a dog next to him. "Hey, you're all right, Kata." He put his hand out, which Kata immediately shook as the proctor announced Kiba the winner. They went their separate ways, Kata back up to his team and Kiba escorted by a medic Nin to get treated. Naruto grinned and turned to address Hinata and Shino. "Hey, Kiba's really good. I didn't know he was so flexible and stuff. Tabeo." Shino nodded once. "Indeed, Kiba is very flexible. Why, you ask? Because his attack, the Tsuga, crossed Fong. And its combination attack, the Getsuga, generates wind currents to propel and steer the attack. He must contort and bend his body in midair to steer." Hinata seemed to shrink in on herself, but spoke just the same. All while spinning rapidly and staying aware of his surroundings. "Keikibakuin is very talented, but." Shino finished for her, swiftly filling the gap of Hinata's hesitance. "But he tends to underestimate his opponents. Why, then, did he treat Pinopo Kata with respect so quickly? It is a valid question." Sakura's voice chimed in softly, "Kata's a frontline fighter." Naruto turned to his teammate, head cocked. "What was that, Sakura?" The pinkette jumped, like she was surprised that she spoke aloud. "Oh, nothing, just." Seeing that all three of them were staring at her, she cleared her throat. Well, Pinopo Kata-san seemed like a frontline fighter. A straight man, if you will. Like he said, he didn't seem to have many tricks up his sleeve, and we didn't get a single taste of his ninjutsu abilities. He fought in the exact way a guy like Kiba can respect. Up close and personal. Ichimichim, I think Kiba may have seen a kindred spirit in Kata," she finished, giggling a little. Naruto nodded, following along. "Yeah, it did seem that way, huh?" They were prevented further conversation when the board displayed the next two fighters. Rock Lee versus Nara Shikamaru. Naruto heard Shikamaru mumble under his breath, "What a drag. Can't I just forfeit now?" Unfortunately for him, Ino also heard, and very loudly declined his request, demanding he get out on the floor that instant. On the arena floor, Lee quickly bowed to his opponent, proclaiming, "Thank you for facing me this day. May our fight be youthful and vigorous, and may a bond flourish between us." His thumb up, arm out, and teeth shining, Lee looked the absolute picture of excitement. By contrast, Shikamaru's eyebrow was visibly twitching. "It's nothing personal, but I pretty much hate everything you're standing for right now," he mumbles, glancing over at the proctor. "I guess I'm ready." Lee throws his fist into the air. "Yosh, let us begin." The sickly Chūnin calls for the match to begin, and Shikamaru flies back instantly, landing heavily on his ass and groaning. Lee, having dashed forward evidently much faster than Shikamaru could react, stood with his fist extended. Shikamaru, coughing as the wind was knocked out of him, climbed carefully back to his feet. "Damn," he wheezed. "This is more troublesome than I thought it would be." Looking up at Lee, he sighed and plopped back down, crossing his legs and putting his hands together in the rat sign. Lee, not knowing what he was doing, raced forward and intended to press the advantage, not wanting to give Shikamaru a chance to fire whatever jutsu he was preparing for. But Shikamaru had that one moment head start, and his shadow expanded rapidly, extending 2 feet from him. A tendril of shadow raced along the ground to meet Lee's, and Lee stopped in place. Whispers ran through the crowd as Shikamaru stood up, Lee assuming a neutral pose. "Shadow possession complete," Shikamaru said in a flat voice. Naruto scrunched up his eyebrows. "Oi, Sakura-chan, what just happened?" She turned to face him. Shikamaru is from the Nara clan. They carry secret family techniques involving controlling their own shadows. One way they can use it is by attaching to someone else's shadow and basically making them copy the shadow user's every move. "And it looks like Lee's caught," she added as they both turned back to watch the fight. Lee's face contorted in frustration. "I cannot move." Shikamaru sighed. "Well, now that I have a moment to actually think, how in the world am I going to beat you?" "You mean he doesn't have a plan yet and he's this far into the fight? What in the world did I miss?" Naruto spun around at the voice and saw several people coming in through the hallway behind them. He wasn't sure who spoke, though he knew it was a man. More importantly, Naruto finally saw his sensei for the first time since this whole damn exam started. "Oi, Kakashi-sensei, where the hell have you been?" Before the Jounin could speak probably all lies. Anyway, the Hokage himself re-entered the room, having left shortly after explaining the purpose of the preliminaries. "That'd be my fault, Naruto-kun. My apologies. I had to borrow all of your sensei to bring them up to speed about certain events that occurred as a result of this most recent exam task." Kakashi sidled up to his remaining genin and put his hand on each of their shoulders, his one visible eye smiling. "So, what did we miss?" Sakura answered promptly and professionally. "Inuzuka Kiba of Team 8 fought against
Po. Ponopo kata?
of Kusagakyur. They were evenly matched until Akamaru joined the fight and turned into a clone of Kiba. Shortly after, Kata had to forfeit, saying he didn't want to get needlessly beat up when he didn't see a way he could turn the fight around. Kakashi nodded. "Smart kid. Kept up with Kiba, though? Not bad." One of the women who came in, dressed in a cloth-wrapped dress and sporting red eyes, asked aloud, "Kiba won his match? Well done. Where is he, though?" Shino answered, this time with his usual manner of explanation. "He is being tended to by medics, sensei." "Why, you ask?" "Because he took a heavy cut across his torso that needed to be dressed before he lost too much blood." Teammates' apparent sensei seemed worried, but knowing that he was under care and neither Shino nor Hinata seemed worried put her at ease. Spectral. The Hokage and the sensei for what seemed to be every team in the room spread out along the balcony for the moment. None of the ones with teams on the other balcony could join them until the match was over. Speaking of which, it seemed Lee's sensei, who looked like he could be the kid's dad to Naruto, seemed affronted that his student was in trouble. "Lee, what happened?" "I cannot move, Guy-sensei. I am sorry. I have been defeated before my flames of youth even had a chance to burn." Guy seemed greatly distressed by this revelation.
No, Le.
"If your dreams are in jeopardy, then you must use it." Guy seemed to notice something and hurried to add, "Ah, but just a little bit." Lee's face set in a determined glare.
Hi, Guy-sensei.
His eyes closed, and the hall was silent. Kakashi sensed it first and nervously asked, Guy, what exactly did you teach your student?" Shikamaru felt it next, his eyes snapping open, having closed them and blocked out everything around him as he fought to think of a way to win in this situation. All of a sudden, his control over Lee's shadow was slipping away, and he refocused his efforts to holding the taijutsu user in place. But soon he knew he was wasting his time and chakra, and it was obvious what Guy had taught his student with Lee's next exclamation. "Hashiman, Ichi Geto, Kaimon, open, 8 inner gates. First gate, gate of opening." Shikamaru released the jutsu and leapt back as Lee's heel impacted the concrete, where he had just been standing, cracking it and sending up shards of stone. While Sakura whispered a quick explanation of the inner gates to Naruto, Shikamaru had to divert every ounce of his attention to dodging the impossibly fast and strong Lee. As such, he very nearly didn't hear his sensei basically telling him to forfeit or risk serious injury. And for some reason, that just pissed the normally lazy Nara off. And so it was that a few explosive tags found their way into his hand. In what would later be described as a very foolhardy and reckless move, Shikamaru stopped moving for just enough of a second to release the tags and allow them to float in the air as he jumped away again, ere that Lee proceeded to occupy in the next moment. The tags went off and Shikamaru, not nearly trusting them to do their job, landed and sat down again, immediately running through barely familiar hand signs. In the next instant, his shadow had expanded into a 30-foot wide circle around him, and he was running through even more hand signs, sluggishly muttering them under his breath to keep track. As soon as he stopped and held the rat sign again, Lee came from the smoke of the explosion, a veritable bullet aimed at knocking Shikamaru out with a single kick. He didn't get the chance. His shadow connected with Shikamaru's jutsu, but Lee wasn't stopped. Instead, a black tendril of what couldn't be anything other than Shikamaru's shadow burst from the ground and intercepted Lee's kick, holding as solid as steel. Lee leapt back and watched as the tendril sunk back into the circle seamlessly. Shikamaru cracked one eye open and said with a shaky breath, "Shadow sensory. Set. Shadow stitching jutsu." Up on the balcony, Ino was the first in the room to recover from this turnabout. "Hell yeah. Way to go, you lazybones. I don't know when you learned that, but hey, where did you learn that? Sensei?" The man looked down at Ino for a moment before training his eyes back to Shikamaru. The Shadow Sensory Jutsu combined with Shadow Stitching Jutsu, two advanced techniques held by the Nara clan. I had thought he couldn't even do the Shadow Strangle Jutsu, and these two are even more advanced than that. Honestly, I'm not convinced he even knew he could pull them off, judging by the look on his face. And besides that, it looks like he's having a really hard time keeping the jutsu active combined this way. The sensory technique, from what little I understand, was meant to be spread thinly over a very large area. It was meant to catalog and identify the shadows contained in its perimeter slowly, as a means of scouting ahead. Conversely, the shadow stitching jutsu is a direct attack as well as a means of restraint, the shadow tendrils capable of piercing through flesh and bone. He's using the sensory jutsu in a much greater density than I'm familiar with, probably to account for Lee's raw speed. Shikamaru, meanwhile, had closed his eyes once again, sweat beginning to trickle down his temple as he focused on defending against Lee's too-fast assault. Coming in from every angle, each strike just as heavy and random as the last. It was all Shikamaru could do to keep Lee away from him while he tried to think of a way out of this that didn't involve giving up. After almost a minute of this, Lee backed off and looked up at the balcony. "Guy-sensei, I wish to remove them and prove my conviction." Guy, clearly caught up in the moment of the somehow intense battle, thrust his hand out, giving Lee a thumbs up. "Go ahead, Lee, and let your flames of youth burn brightly." "Yash!" Lee leapt into the air, backflipping onto the tip of the hand sign statue and sitting down, pulling his orange legwarmers off. Sakura squinted up at him. Training weights? Would that really make so much of a difference? Shikamaru, wondering what was going on, cracked one eye open and looked up at his opponent. Lee, his weights in hand and his legwarmers back on, stood up and held the weights out at arm's length. "Yash! Finally I am unrestrained." And as he said this, he dropped the weights, letting them fall all the way to the arena floor, where they cratered several feet into the concrete and sent up dust clouds that reached the ceiling. Everyone in the room save for Team Guy expressed the appropriate shock, though none more so than Shikamaru, who promptly shouted, "Oh, come on!" His eyes shut directly afterward, forgetting about strategy and just hoping to impale Lee by luck while defending. And defend he did, for several of the near-invisible kicks Lee sent his way. Each one was now causing the shadow tendrils to bend and recoil, and eventually Shikamaru simply couldn't keep up. One strike was all it would have taken, and one strike was what Lee got. Slipping past Shikamaru's defense, Lee's foot impacted with the Nara's head right as he opened his eyes, sensing the danger. Shikamaru's limp body was thrown across the arena, his shadow shrinking and returning to normal as the technique ended. Hayate appeared next to the prone boy and checked him before standing and raising his hand, coughing a few times. Winner by knockout, Rock Lee. Spectral. Spectral. As Shikamaru was cared for and carried away by medic means, Lee was escorted by another nurse to determine the aftereffects of opening the first gate. Damn, poor Shikamaru. I guess that's what a year of really training can do for you. Huh. Naruto whipped his head around and shouted, Kiba, when did you get back? Around the time eyebrows down there stopped playing around and took off his weights. That's kind of a good idea, actually. Maybe I'll get some weighted equipment. Hinata immediately dug around in her hip pouch and pulled out a small circular tin. Kiba-kun, you got hurt. This will numb the pain. Kiba laughed and put his hand on the offered medicine, pushing it back to her. They already gave me some stuff, Hinata, but thanks. Besides, it'll be fine, it's just a cut. Naruto, though, eyed the tin with interest. Hinata, you make medicine? She squeaked adorably and blushed, fiddling with the container and nearly dropping it. Sometimes. It's nothing PP professional. Just some herbs. Naruto grinned at both her weird but cute demeanor and her response. That's so cool, though. Do you think it could numb Sakura's leg? She kind of broke it in the forest. Everyone around them gasped and noticed the compression bandages around Sakura's shin and ankle for what seemed like the first time. Teammate Sensei said, Naruto, I really don't think some home-mixed herbs are going to cure a broken leg. Sakura, you shouldn't even be standing right now. Did you walk here? Sakura smacked Naruto upside the head very softly, though clearly not meaning it. What Naruto meant to say was that I got a minor fracture that's already mostly healed but still hurts and gets in the way. Naruto chuckled and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Hey, yeah, it didn't fully break. Kakashi was clearly about to protest, but Sakura cut him off with a glare. I'm fighting, Sensei. I have to do this. She turned back to Hinata and smiled, her cheeks heating up in slight embarrassment. So, do you think I could borrow some of that? If it's not too much trouble, and only if it's not going to leave you high and dry. Hinata shook her head immediately, giving a timid smile back. Oh no, it's no trouble. I'd be glad to help. Just raise your foot. Sakura leaned back into Naruto's chest and raised her leg, who immediately brought his hands up and gripped her shoulders for balance, something they had already done while she was putting on her sandals earlier. Naruto thought little of it. Their bond was growing stronger and deeper with every action. Lately, but everyone else noticed the closeness and saw a drastic change in their interactions. Hinata briefly looked shocked and sad before kneeling down and gently pulling Sakura's sandal off, then going to work on removing the bandages. Probing a few dark spots with her fingers, she tentatively asked, Does this hurt? Nope, not anything new anyway. Hinata continued asking as she poked and turned Sakura's foot, Sakura calling out when one thing or another caused an increase or change in the pain. Examination done, Hinata opened the tin and dipped her fingers inside, spreading the balm over her hands and rubbing it into Sakura's leg. A few seconds into this and Sakura sighed happily. Numbing medicine or no, you'd be a great masseuse, Hinata. The pale-eyed girl's face turned beet red, and she muttered out, Arigato. Hinata finished wrapping up Sakura's leg just in time, as the board stopped spinning and announced the next fight. Haruno Sakura versus Uzumaki Karen. Well, good thing Hinata had that medicine, Sakura didn't notice it at first, but then it glared her in the face, and she turned to look at Naruto. Naruto, though, had seen it immediately, and he had also seen the movement on the other balcony, the redhead from Kusagakure getting up and heading down the stairs to the arena floor. Sakura-chan I know I will. I promise. Sakura gave him a quick hug and turned to head down the stairs. Just before she did, she turned and gave Hinata a hug as well. Thank you, she said quickly, flashing the blushing girl a smile before steadily making her way down the steps. Glad that her leg was both mostly healed and dulled from Hinata's cream, she walked anxiously to stand across from the exhausted-looking girl, giving her a nervous smile. Hi.
Iem Haruno Sekure.
Why you're Uzumaki Karen, right? The redhead looked at her oddly. Why yeah. What is it? Sakura blushed, totally unsure how to start. Well, it's just, Uzumaki is kind of an uncommon name, isn't it? Karen frowned. Yeah. There aren't many of us left, for real. Yuzushiogakure was wiped out years ago, and the few survivors of the Uzumaki clan have scattered apart since then. Again, why do you ask? Sakura smiled sheepishly and gestured over her shoulder with her head. My teammate over there. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. He's an orphan and, well, we didn't even know there was an Uzumaki clan. Karen's eyes widened, and she looked up at the blonde. A small smile cut her face and she seemed to straighten, somewhat rejuvenated. I'd like to talk to him after this, if that's okay. Sakura smiled and nodded happily. He'd love that. A series of coughs made them both turn to see Hayate. The man looked between them and asked, Are both of you ready? They nodded and faced each other, Karen seeming to have regained some of her vitality. The proctor brought his hand into the air and paused for only a moment before bringing it down sharply. Hajime! He yelled, leaping away to a safe location. The moment he did, Sakura started performing a series of hand signs, hoping to catch Karen in a genjutsu early. Unfortunately for her, the cascade of cherry blossom petals was actually seen only by her. Karen could see right through it. And as such, Karen had drawn a kunai and came right for her. Sakura leapt back a few steps from the first swipe, drawing her own kunai and quickly devising a new plan. Karen tightened her grip and said, Sorry, Sakura-san, but my ability lets me see right through genjutsu and other illusions. You'll have to beat me in a straight fight if you want to win this one. For real. We'll see about that. Sakura glanced around, not seeing much she could use to her advantage. This was little more than a large sparring mat, only small bits of concrete and tile debris left over from the previous fights. Although, Sakura grimaced and intercepted Karen's lunge with her kunai, lashing out with her good leg and making the redhead back off, wincing as her ankle complained at the sudden pressure, even through the numbing medicine. Dashing forward a few feet, she pressed the offensive on Karen, a wide left punch hiding a low stab. Karen was tired, but not that tired. The Uzumaki girl took a grazing cut to her side as she ducked under Sakura's fist, failing to completely dodge both attacks. Sakura didn't let up, though, pressing her shoulder forward and forcing Karen to keep backing up, bending backward impressively to avoid a spinning back elbow. Karen snapped back upright and hopped into the air as Sakura used the momentum of her spin to duck down and try to kick her legs out from under her. Karen, her legs tucked tightly under her, only got a foot or so off the ground, leaving her in range of Sakura's follow-up upward slash and with no way to reliably defend. The redhead cried out as her thigh was cut fairly deep, blood running down her leg as she landed and stumbled slightly. But she fought through it, quickly retaliating with a stab at Sakura's neck, which just nicked her shoulder. Having slightly overextended on her lunge, Karen was forced to follow up with a shoulder bash, which effectively sent Sakura backpedaling, clutching her chest. The two girls took half a second to catch their breath before going at it again, Sakura flipping her kunai into a reverse grip, locking it with Karen's. But Karen wasn't expecting Sakura to reach with her other hand and grab her opponent's arm. Sakura twisted and rolled Karen over her back and shoulder, throwing her onto her back and knocking the wind out of her. She went for a stomp to the shoulder of the arm she was holding, but Karen showed yet more flexibility by forcing herself into a sitting position, her lower body scooting along the ground as her arm twisted awkwardly behind her. Sakura's foot came down behind her on the floor, and Karen proceeded to take full advantage of the chance she had made. Spinning her lower body, she dropped the kunai and twisted her arm around in Sakura's grip to grasp her wrist, Karen's legs passing under her right arm. Turning on her but to face Sakura now, her left leg came up and knocked into Sakura's hip at the same time she yanked on her arm, effectively knocking and pulling Sakura to the ground beside her. Karen quickly rolled atop Sakura and raised her fist up to punch her, but Sakura had other plans. Her legs came up and kneed the other girl in the butt, forcefully rolling backward and skidding Karen's head against the ground as Sakura threw her off. They both took a moment to get up, Sakura somewhat winded by her landing. Sakura dug around in her pack for a while before pulling out 4 shuriken, Karen deciding to rush her. The redhead dodged around the throwing stars, dropping into a slide at the last second that Sakura leapt over. Karen came up and immediately kicked the other girl in her injured ankle, Sakura crying out and falling to her knees, catching herself on her hands. Karen panted, her exhaustion really catching up to her. She stalked forward and pulled a kunai out, saying, "You're a feisty little brawler, aren't ya? Not really what I was expecting." "Bet you weren't expecting this, either." Karen's eyes widened as Sakura flung her hands up and to the sides, the 4 shuriken she threw earlier leaping off the ground and coming around in a wide arc, headed right for her. Karen just barely noticed the ninja wire running from Sakura's hands to the metal stars before the wire caught around her, the shuriken being jerked and their arcs tightening as the wire tied her up. At first it was sort of loose, and she probably would have been able to escape, but then the shuriken finished traveling around her and dug into her skin, making her cry out. She yelped all the more as Sakura pulled her arms in, tightening the wire and tugging on Karen's legs. The Uzumaki was forced to stumble forward awkwardly, right into a small pile of rubble. It was enough to destabilize her, tied up and tired as she was, and she fell forward, turning her head instinctively to protect her nose and glasses. Sakura's foot ended up on her back, and Karen groaned out, "When did you even have time to do that? For real?" Sakura giggled a little. "I'm pretty fast with my fingers. You should see how quickly I can patch clothes or sew a pocket." Hayate's voice rang out through the room. "Uzumaki Karen is unable to continue. Winner, Haruno Sakura." Sakura quickly removed her foot and helped pick the other girl up, carefully pulling the 4 shallow shuriken from her and untangling the wire. Karen winced, but then smiled and shook Sakura's hand. "You want to come up and say hi to your maybe cousin?" Karen seemed to glance up nervously at her 2 teammates, but quickly took Sakura's hand less formally and agreed. Sakura blushed a little, a bit awkward as the hand-holding felt more affectionate than it was probably meant to be. She also couldn't help but notice, being who she was, that Karen seemed distinctly afraid of going back up to her teammates. She grinned though, and brought Karen over to the stairs that would take them back to Naruto. There were too many things on her mind already. She'd confront that topic if and when it became important. Spectral. Spectral. Karen's heart thumped hard in her chest, and it was due to far more than the adrenaline. As she neared the spiky blonde-haired boy, her spirits just soared higher and higher. Finally, she would meet another member of her clan. Ashelu. Damn it, why did she have to be so quiet? Speak up, for real. Ashi. Uzumaki Naruto. Tabeo. Karen's head snapped up and she met his nervous blue eyes. Are his pupils golden? For a moment, just a moment, she allowed herself to look. Her power active, she could sense, even see the chakra around her. Sakura's was precise. It knew exactly what to do, when to do it. There was hardly any wasted effort in anything she did. It was an admirable trait, to be sure, though the somewhat shaken and scared mood it gave off sometimes made her worry. The blue-haired girl, who seemed just as shy as she felt, had a deeper hue to her chakra, and it twitched periodically, like a nervous bird. And yet, it roared, as though there was a hidden something sleeping below the surface. The wild-looking boy with the dog had chakra much like she'd expected, untamed and nearly in sync with his companion. The quiet boy with the sunglasses, at first glance, seemed to have no chakra. Then, he seemed to have altogether too much, the energy permeating his body in ways it shouldn't, writhing and shifting. She quickly realized that this was because he had millions of tiny beings living inside him, feeding off his chakra. The thought made her shudder, reminded of her other ability. The sensei were interesting in and of themselves, but it was the blonde boy she really paid attention to. If it would have helped, she would have squinted at the brightness of his chakra. While most people she looked at had some variation of blue or purple chakra, sometimes tinting in the greens, Naruto, her kinsman, had the brightest energy she had ever seen. Firstly, it had a kind of history to it, something she had only seen in elder shinobi. It seemed to have changed once already, vestiges of the original deep blue still flickering and filtering through his body. But mostly she saw gold. Pure, bright golden chakra. It has to be his ability, but I've never heard of this in any of Uncle's stories. And why is there so much? Naruto's chakra was dancing with what she knew was joy, self-consciousness, excitement, and fear. A complex combination that told her two important things. He was happy to meet her and afraid she wouldn't like him. Unsurprising, considering she was feeling the exact same way. It was even more shocking, however, when she saw the same taint of burnt red-orange that she had seen in that red-haired boy from Suna. How the two were related, she wasn't sure, but both reds were distinctly both separate and connected to the two boys' normal chakra. And it was angry. All of these observations, these thoughts, took place under the span of less than a second before she shut off her ability, and Karen stuttered out, trying to speak louder. "And very nice tea to meet you, for real."
Uzumaki Karin.
"Why, your cousin, I guess? And maybe?" Naruto grinned hugely. "Ah, that's so cute. Wait, shit, who's older? Damn it, that's important, for real." And said, "Hee hee."
And likewise.
So, I guess I should introduce you to my friends, right? Is that how this goes? He trailed off near the end, scratching his cheek in what had to be embarrassment. Sakura laughed and put her free hand on his shoulder. "Oh, Cammy," I'm still holding her hand. "I didn't even notice, for real." Shaking her head and saying, "Calm down, Naruto-kun. Both of you, just breathe. Neither of you are going anywhere." Just as he opened his mouth, the proctor's voice rang out again. "Uzumaki Naruto, will you please join us on the floor?" A series of coughs broke the sentence. "Your turn." Karen and the others all looked down at the ground floor, seeing Hayate standing with an impatient-looking boy in a black suit with purple face paint. Karen sighed as she realized she'd have to wait to speak to him. Naruto turned to her and grinned, infecting her a little with his smile. "Don't worry. I'll finish this up in a jiffy, Databeo." Karen grinned a little more at the thought. "Oh, Cammy, don't tell me weird verbal tics is a genetic trait. For real." As Naruto was passing by her, Sakura grabbed his arm, arresting his motion and looking into his eyes. Karen blushed by just being in proximity to such an intense look, watching them have half an argument. "Naruto-kun, don't dash." "I know, I'll keep it subtle. But that doesn't mean." "I'll try dash." "Well, use it if dash." "Sakura-chan, make up your mind, ha ha ha." "Okay, then use it." "You sure?" Sakura huffed and let go of him. "Why are you asking me? It's your thing." Karen was at a loss. How close were these two that they could have such an ambiguous conversation and know what they were talking about? And did Sakura really notice how she had, presumably, as there was no way to tell what it was about, completely turned her stance around? Naruto laughed and put his hands on the balcony rail, saying, "Well, I do want to finish this quickly," and leapt over the railing, landing on the floor below them and walking up to face the Chūnin. Sakura gripped Karen's hand tighter, though the redhead doubted that the pinkette noticed. "Just be careful, Naruto-kun." Karen felt her mouth moving before she could stop it. "Yeah, and kick his butt. For real." "Why, you can do it, Naruto-kun." Karen looked over, surprised as the meek blue-haired girl cheered, as well. Then her head whipped around as another voice called out, "Come on, dude. Don't embarrass Konoha, you got Sakura here, right? You can take this guy." The dog boy turned and quirked his eyebrow at Sakura, asking, "Hey, Where's that prick, Sasuke? Anyway? Karen felt Sakura's hand tighten in hers again, though this time was driven noticeably by anger. That prick is gone. He left me to get raped and tried to kill Naruto before he took off. I'm not going to talk about him, she growled out, and Karen's heart leapt into her throat at the information. Sakura-san, are you Dash? Oh, Kami, Sakura-san, what, how could Dash? Sakura chuckled a little at her and Hinata, both stumbling to ask if she was okay.
I'm alright.
Or I will be. Naruto stopped them before anything major happened. Karen was about to ask about it when another girl's voice interrupted them, stomping up to their end of the balcony. Hey, forehead, did you say Sasuke-kun is gone? Even Karen, out of the loop as she was, could tell that the blonde girl had made a grave error. Sakura. Her forehead isn't even that big. Her hair frames it nicely. Turned slowly to look at the girl. Ino pig. That bastard told Nin to rape me while he went off with their hussy teammate and abandoned the village. He stabbed Naruto. For all I care, that asshole can get eaten by a giant bear, because I'm moving on. The girl, Ino, was evidently stunned into silence, as the only thing that could be heard was the dog boy that beat Kata muttering, "Fucking asshole." Knew he was no good, and the sounds of fighting. Speaking of fighting, Karen glanced down at the arena and gasped, rushing to let go of Sakura and grabbing the rail, calling out, "WH, what is that thing? What happened?" She felt them all coming to gather at the railing, gasping as Kankuro seemed to laugh darkly, proclaiming that he would win with his next attack. Naruto had been doing very well, pushing Kankuro to show his hand. Karen looked over to the speaker, a silver-haired male Chūnin with a mask. At the beginning, the Kankuro we all saw was actually a well-disguised ninja puppet, the bundle on its back being the real Kankuro. When Naruto nearly took the puppet's arm off, Kankuro revealed himself and came at Naruto with his puppet's various blades and darts. All of them were, apparently, poisoned. Naruto didn't seem to be getting hurt, but it looks like Kankuro's puppet has a few tricks up its many sleeves. Karen looked back down at the strange wooden contraption, its 4 arms and 2 legs splitting apart joint by joint, knives, spikes, and other wicked-looking blades sprouting all over the place. The thin main body also seemed to open slightly, a myriad of blades and what looked like spiked chains sprouting from the torso as the head finally separated, a blade extending down from its neck. Each piece, somehow controlled by Kankuro, started whirling in a tornado of poisoned death around Naruto, who was twisting his head this way and that, seemingly looking for a gap or a way out. "Try deflecting this one, damn it," Kankuro yelled, clearly irritated by Naruto's survivability. The torso came at him first, the chains wrapping around Naruto and dragging the weaponized torso in to embrace him. The individual partitions of the limbs came in at every other angle as well, completely concealing Naruto under wood, blade, and the puppet's ragged cloak. Shock and silence spread through the arena, the proctor too surprised at such a lethal move to call the match. But then a voice yelled out, "Naruto-kun, you can't die here. You can't give up." Karen looked, startled once again, as the blue-haired, pale-eyed shy girl leaned far over the railing, tears streaming down her face as she screamed for Naruto to not be dead. The Uzumaki's red hair whipped around as Sakura interrupted, fairly calm. "He's not dead, Hinata-san. It's okay. Something as simple as a blade can't cut him. Not anymore." Hinata seemed to choke on the breath she drew in, Karen right there with her. "Sakura-san. What are you talking about?" "Geez, Hinata. I don't think I've ever heard you be that loud." All of the Konoha Genin and Karen, sans Sakura, gasped as Naruto's voice echoed out from inside the puppet. "Feels kind of nice to have someone cheer for me like that, Databeo." Kankuro took a shocked step back, frustratedly growling out, How are you alive?" "Simple, Tabeo," Naruto answered, sounding maddeningly cheerful. Crack CK. The wood of Kankuro's puppet's torso was split open at the back as a fist was driven through it from inside. The fist, Karen, and surely everyone else noticed, was covered with what looked like some smooth yet spiked light blue crystal. It almost looked made from the stuff, so opaque and complete was the coating. The fist retracted, the whole mound of puppet parts shaking as Kankuro struggled to hold them in place. Finally, the wood splintered in several places, limbs flying off and the main torso being thrown to the ground, Naruto emerging to the gasps of nearly everyone in the room. Can the Uzumaki ability really manifest in such a way? Or is this something else? Naruto stood from his hunched, caged posture, standing not quite tall and spreading his diamond-like skeletal wings, a skeletal whip-like tail of the same material swaying behind him, looking like an extension of his spine, the tip splitting into 3 wicked, jointed spikes. And every inch of skin that could be seen on his hands and face and through the rips and tears in his jacket and pants was covered in the same blue crystal. Naruto's eyes snapped open and Karen got lost in their glowing intensity as he proclaimed, "You can't kill a specter with a knife, dumbass." A pause as he reached down and picked up one of the puppet's limbs, examining the shattered stump of a blade. "Not even if they're poisoned. Tabeo." Everyone watched, speechless, as Naruto dropped the broken toy and rolled his shoulder, proceeding to examine his clothes. "They did a number on my outfit though, Kyuso. You know, I'm getting kind of tired of having my clothes all torn up." Databeo, as he unzipped and took off his jacket, revealing the shredded and stretched black shirt underneath, he added, "Although most of it was probably me, I admit." Kankuro, it seemed, broke free from his stupor first. What are you? What kind of jutsu is that?" Karen watched, entranced, as Naruto continued to remove his torn shirt, revealing more of the muscularly styled diamond-like coating. He seemed to grin, a terrifying sight as the crystal crinkled and folded around his mouth, the short horns jutting out atop his headband, making him seem like a dragon or a devil. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the next Hokage, and I'm a specter, Databeo." Spectral. Spectral. Hinata heard Sakura laugh and mutter, "I guess he liked that stupid name I came up with after all." But she paid the pinkette little mind. She was altogether too busy staring as Naruto stripped down to his torn pants, the now golden blonde boy swishing his tail idly, batting the remains of Kankuro's puppet away. "You know," she heard him say, as though lamenting about less than perfect weather, "I had kind of hoped to keep this kind of a secret, but, well, I've got to hand it to you. That puppet is wicked fast. Anyone else would probably be a poisoned pincushion by now." Naruto's grin, which was a strange mix of terrifying and more handsome, widened a bit, as did his stance. "Good thing you fought me, huh? Well, I guess it's not so good now that your puppet is broken. Sorry about that, by the way." Naruto dashed forward, evidently catching Kankuro off guard, as suddenly the blonde's freakily prehensile tail was wrapped around the Suna boy's neck. "I think I win, though." Kankuro twitched and flailed as he was held up by a suddenly straight-faced, dark-eyed Naruto. Hinata felt her heart clench. He was in pain. Naruto, her inspiration, her drive, was hiding some new darkness, nothing like the loneliness she had seen in him before. Some new fury had been born in him since she last saw him before the test. She had almost seen it earlier, could nearly identify the flickers in his new eyes, but she had been too painfully shy to say or do anything as usual. Now it was starting to look like whatever had happened, whether it was Sasuke's betrayal or something else entirely, was bubbling to the surface. Naruto looked ready to take out his anger on Kankuro. She had to do something. Naruto would never forgive himself if he killed the older boy in anger at something else. And Kankuro certainly didn't deserve to die. Even she could tell that the attempt on Naruto's life had been a last resort, final move sort of attack. Kankuro had seemed genuinely upset that his poison hadn't taken Naruto out of the fight. No, she had to stop him before he did something he'd regret. Her voice caught in her throat from her own damnable shyness and insecurity, but she got it out, a choked-off, and narrowed dash. She saw his eyes twitch to meet hers instantly, and her heart leaped into her throat. For a single timeless moment, Naruto's bubbling rage had been directed at her, but it passed just as quickly for them both, as Naruto's eyes softened, his face looking somewhat ashamed. The golden-haired boy dropped the puppet user, Kankuro falling to his knees and gasping for breath. Naruto took a step back and his wings and tail seemed to retract back into his body, the diamond coating sinking into his skin all over, leaving him looking normal again. Well, topless with a side of glowing golden pupils, but normal nonetheless. Hinata sighed in relief even as her face heated up from seeing him like that. She couldn't help it. Just changing her own clothes or taking a shower in privacy made her a little nervous. She had no hope of simply ignoring Naruto's somewhat defined chest. Still, she was saved from any potential daydreaming by the boy's soft and ashamed voice.
Hey, I'm sorry, Tebayo.
I'm kind of dealing with some pretty messed up shit right now, what with my teammate and former best friend kind of almost killing me and abandoning the village. I didn't mean to almost use you as an outlet. Kankuro coughed one more time and made to stand up, rubbing his neck, no doubt feeling imprints of the bone-like tail.
Yeah.
We've all got problems, I guess. Just then, you reminded me of. Kankuro seemed hesitant to finish, but simply said, somebody I know. Anyway, it's all right. A twitch of Kankuro's fingers set everyone around her on edge, including Naruto. But when the puppet's remains flew across the room to hover before him, Kankuro simply seemed to examine the damage. It doesn't look like you broke many of Karasu's mechanical components. A joint here or there, but I have spares. Almost all of the blades are broken and I'll need some new lumber to fix the limbs, but he'll be all right. Kankuro turned to face Naruto. And hey, I didn't know about your teammate. That sounds really rough. That somebody you trusted would do that to you. Naruto nodded and sighed emphatically. Don't worry about it. I just want to move on and forget about the asshole already. A cough interrupted them, the proctor slowly stepping forward. Kankuro-san, do you forfeit? What, that doesn't count as a straight-up win for you? The Suna boy asked, incredulous. Man, you Konoha guys are a lot more hard-edged than I thought. Yeah, if you need me to, I forfeit. Not like I could do much to this guy that I haven't already tried. Kankuro chuckled and flexed his fingers, a puppet hand flying out to grab his discarded wrapping and bundle up the remains. Never would have expected to encounter another ultimate defense in this village, though. Another? Hinata thought, watching Hayate call the match and the two boys go their separate ways back to their teams. Naruto was heading towards them, donning his torn black shirt and simply hanging the more ruined jacket over his shoulder.
Ara, Naruto.
Looks like I'll be seeing you in the finals, huh? Kiba said, clapping the blonde on the back. Naruto laughed and punched him in the arm, something Hinata had never understood. I guess so. Just hope we don't have to face each other. My armor would probably declaw you. Ha ha ha. Oh hey, Sakura-chan. Well, did I do good? Hinata tried not to be jealous. It was really a nasty habit, and Sakura was overall a nice girl. She didn't deserve that. Sakura shook her head. It's do well, Naruto-kun. And yes, you did. It was very impressive and flashy, though you kind of scared us near the end. Naruto's face fell. Yeah. Sorry. You know how it is. Hinata couldn't bear to see him too downcast. She blacked out, and when she next was aware, her arms were around him, burying her damp eyes into his shoulder and speaking. I wasn't as scared of you. I was scared F for you, and Naruto-kun, why you were in so much pain. Before Hinata really had the chance to realize and react to what she had done, Naruto's chest rumbled with laughter, and his strong arms came to return her embrace. His laugh-staggered voice came down from slightly above her. Why do I have to be so short? Don't be afraid for me either, silly. I'm fine, I'll be okay. Thank you, Hinata. That was all she could handle. The next thing she knew, she was waking up on the floor, having been sitting against the wall. She slowly stood up, catching a glimpse of some Medinin carrying someone away down on the arena floor. What happened? Sakura turned around at her small voice and smiled. Hey there, sleepyhead. I guess you must have caught a big whiff of the poison left on Naruto's clothes. You passed out for 2 matches. Hinata's eyes widened and she blushed as she looked into Sakura's eyes and knew that the other girl was covering for her. She could tell that Sakura knew exactly why she had fainted and was giving her an out. Immensely grateful, she struggled to feign ignorance and said, "Ah, wawes, Tach, that must have been it. So, what happened while IW was asleep?" Naruto looked over his shoulder, wearing a fresh shirt and pair of pants, apparently, and said, "You just missed Karen's other teammate, Hatsu. Something almost drowned that girl from Suna." Karen scoffed. "Oh please, Hatsuhashi was bluffing. He wouldn't have been able to keep that bubble up for much longer. For real, if Temari had tried to hold her breath, he would have wore himself out and she could have mopped up his own mess with him." Kiba laughed and pointed out, "Yeah, but instead she pretended to promise to forfeit to get out of it. Didn't do her much good. Though, Hatsuhashi has a surprisingly strong right hook." Hinata turned to Karen. "So, your teammate is going to the finals?" Karen sighed, as though entirely unexcited about the prospect. "Looks like it." Hinata smiled and looked between her and Naruto. "Tach, that's great news. And now you and Naruto-kun will have tea time to get to know each other before you have to return home." Karen and Naruto seemed to think about this before grinning. Karen nodded at her and said, "That's a great point, Hinata-san. For real, I hadn't thought of that, thank you." Sakura poked Hinata's shoulder in a friendly manner, saying, "Hey, the other match you missed was between your cousin Niji and his own teammate, Tenten." Hinata gasped, "Oh no, is Tenten-san okay? She can get a awfully hot-headed when she spars with Nissan." Sakura seemed surprised at her reaction, but nodded. "Yeah, Niji disabled her arms, I guess, and she had to forfeit." Naruto laughed. "Not before she tried to come at him with a kunai between her teeth. Reminded me of Zabuza, Sakura-chan." Sakura giggled as well and nodded. "Yes, it was a little familiar." Karen interrupted with the same level of shock Hinata was feeling. "Zabuza? Where in the world did you guys meet a guy with the same name as a member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Hidden Mist?" Sakura and Naruto looked at each other and laughed a little, Naruto shocking everyone with, "We didn't. We met Momoichi Zabuza of the Seven Swordsmen of the Hidden Mist." Hinata nearly fainted, again. Spectral. Spectral. In the end, Hinata didn't have time to faint or be part of the subsequent questioning about Team 7's first mission out of the village. Her name was called right at that moment, and she had to go down and fight against Yamanaka Ino. She had no real problems with that. It wasn't that she disliked Ino or anything. On the contrary, she greatly admired the blonde girl's outgoing nature and sense of style, whether it be in clothes or decorations. It was just that, well, Ino was not exactly nice to everyone, and Hinata would never consider herself to be a spiteful person. But sometimes it felt good to defeat someone who had little but bad things to say about the person you cared for the most. And though Hinata would never bring it up, it was ridiculously easy to tell when Ino tried to fake her own jutsu in order to lure Hinata in. The Byakugan did allow her to see the minutest change in the chakra pathways, after all. Since Ino nearly refused to get close to her after seeing what her cousin could do, Hinata had had to resort to some deception of her own. Pretending to get caught in one of Ino's traps, she waited until the other girl fired her mind possession technique for real and quickly got out of the way, tying Ino's unoccupied body up and winning the match. With only 3 more people left to fight, the board flipped to the next matchup almost before she had crested the stairs. Congratulations already on the lips of the others. Spectral. Spectral. And so it is that the final sibling of the sand takes the stage, to be met with his utter demise, thought Shino, standing with the redhead, waiting for the match to start. No words were exchanged between the two competitors. Ah, one who can appreciate the silence of the true warrior. Perhaps this prey may be worthy of being called opponent? The proctor called the match to begin, and Shino started off strong. A wave of insects, flying from his body at high speeds, raced towards Gaara. And sand poured from the gourd on his back and intercepted the attack without so much as a flinch by the redhead. Shino called his beetles to retreat, making them hover around him as he observed the sand wavering and floating before settling on the ground in a circle. Fascinating. An automatic response, or simply an advanced Doton jutsu. The sand moves fluidly, like a swarm, perhaps a sneak attack. And so it was Shino raising his arm and sending his bugs forward once more. The sand rose to intercept, and the two clouds crashed like waves. Shino received information from his bugs that the sand was laced with chakra, and he set about directing the Kikaichu to absorbing it. The chakra was strange, it killed a couple of them before they adapted to it, but what was more strange was that the chakra never seemed to diminish. It was as though Gaara was continually pouring more into the technique as fast as Shino was draining it. Continue with original plan section off a thin branch of the swarm to circle the sand. Strike. Now. And the sand on the ground rose up to encompass the small attacking force. Shino blinking as he felt their presence in the hive fade away. Gaara had killed them. Or did he? He looked behind him just now, as though he were a dog, confused at what his own tail just did. Perhaps the sand truly is automatic? Fascinating. This would explain the doll child's words earlier about Naruto-sama's ultimate defense. So this opponent has no talent of his own? He simply relies on his sand. Take that away, and... Adjusting his focus, he sends more of his hive out to fully encircle Gaara's sand defense, steadily draining the chakra from whatever jutsu was involved. What do you think you will accomplish with this? Ah, the opponent speaks. Do I deem him worthy of a response? Truly, a conundrum. I suppose I must, if only to inform the slower minds of the room. What, you ask? My insects eat chakra quite efficiently, I must add. How does this relate to your query, you may ask? Because I intend to drain you of your chakra through this ultimate defense you seem determined to stand behind. You aren't touching my chakra. I am not the one controlling the sand right now. Mother is protecting me. Oh dear, more vocalization. And this time the ramblings of a madman. So, not an opponent after all, simply stubborn prey. This is truly growing tiresome. Regardless, I have the upper hand. Why is that, you ask? Because you cannot attack me while you are busy defending, and eventually you will run out of chakra. It is the nature of all things that cross my hive. Oh! Can I not? Shino quickly released more of his hive, focusing them in front of him and making them catch and neutralize the spear of sand that suddenly pushed through the wall of insects. Fascinating. The chakra in that lump of dirt was different, more human, and it didn't regenerate fast enough to avoid being eaten by my bugs. The sand that made up the failed attack fell to the ground, inert and unmoving. Shino inclined his head slightly in a way that he had observed appeared threatening to others. No, you cannot. Though your attempt at harming me has brought something to my attention. So long as this continues, neither of us will win. The chakra in your defensive sand is different to the chakra you use to attack directly. Your defense regenerates at a rate equal to or greater than the rate at which I drain it away. Why is this? Because the chakra is different and does not seem to be coming from you, or at least the you that is you. Oh dear. And now he's gone and gotten me in a chatty mood. Oh well, nothing for it. I, however, will eventually run out of both patience and the energy needed to direct my hive. Without my direction, they will falter and open me up for attack. I cannot allow this. He pulled his forces back, directing them to their home inside of him as he promptly turned around and headed back to the stairs. I forfeit. Why, you ask? Because it is the most logical and strategic move on my part that guarantees that I will remain unharmed this day. Good luck in the finals. He turned to regard Gaara from behind his sunglasses. Opponent. Spectral. Spectral. Wow, Hinata, Shino's kind of. Hinata sighed.
Yes.
He does T10 to get eccentric. Naruto laughed, kind of impressed. It was actually kind of cool. Would have been cooler if it all paid off, but still. Shino joined them, back at the exact spot he had been until his match, and went utterly silent, a gentle buzzing betraying his irritation. Kiba set his hand on his teammate's shoulder and said, cheerfully, "Hey, I thought you were way intimidating, buddy." The buzzing paused, and Shino said, "Did you?" Kiba nodded emphatically. "Hell yeah, that Gaara guy's a freak. Must be one of those people who can't feel fear or something." Naruto didn't know about that or about Gaara being a freak, but it seemed to make Shino happier, in some weird Shino way, so he left it alone. Besides, there was still the problem of... As Akimichi Chuji Koff is the only remaining contestant who has not had a match, we will be repolling from those who failed to secure a spot in the finals. Koff as some are currently incapacitated. The following contestants will have their names reshuffled to be matched against Akimichi Chuji: Sabaku no Kankuro, Panopo Kata, Uzumaki Karen, Aburame Shino, Koff Tenten, and Yamanaka Ino. Please wait while the board is reshuffled. Naruto wondered about the fairness of simply matching Chuji against what were basically the losers, but perked up when he heard Kankuro complain, "Hey, take me off that list. I forfeit. A ninja is basically useless without whatever tools they use, and my puppet is busted to all shit." Naruto chuckled, which only grew to full-bellied laughter as he heard Chuji get bribed with barbecue by his sensei in order to participate. Everyone's eyes were on the board, one slot filled with Chuji's name and the other spinning. Whether each individual person was actually interested in the outcome or simply looking for something to do was anyone's guess. The board stopped, and Naruto cocked his head. "Ha! Somehow I wasn't expecting that. Jan. You know, Chuji's doing really well," Kiba said, laughing a little in surprise. Sakura nodded, watching the rotund boy duck under Kata's tanto yet again, this time also delivering a double palm thrust against his ribs, sliding the Kusa Genin back a good 4 meters. The dark-haired boy adjusted the high collar of his dark gray shirt and held his blade aloft. All of a sudden, 3 short senbon were pulled from his collar and thrown with great speed back at Chuji, who Sakura noticed had yet to press his advantage. Yes, he is, but if he doesn't start following up on his counters, he's just going to wear himself out. As if to prove her point, Chuji jumped back but failed to dodge the surprise attack, 2 of the sunbon embedding deeply into his right thigh, the third passing straight through on the edge and clattering away far behind him. He grunted in frustration, but had little time to respond further. Eyes widening in shock, he performed a short set of hand signs as quickly as he could. Buban Baika no Jutsu, partial multi-size jutsu. His fists and part of his arms expanded rapidly as he wound up and punched the ground, making a large chunk of tile flip up and block the barrage of shuriken Kata had thrown. For perhaps the first time that match, Chuji turned a defensive maneuver into an offensive one. Punching the slightly airborne tile with his other enlarged fist sent it careening at Kata, who had already started charging back at Chuji. Their vision of each other was obscured for those few moments before Kata brought his tanto to bear and, with a glint of steel and a rapid swipe, cut the slab up the middle, passing between the 2 halves. Unfortunately for him, this put him right in the middle of Chuji's further expanding hands. Unable to stop fast enough, Kata tucked his limbs in right as Chuji's fingers closed around him, and the spectators gasped as Kata seemed to scream just as he was hidden from sight. A pause, and Sakura could see something on Chuji's face. Confusion, maybe, perhaps indecision. Regardless, he seemed to recenter himself as he yelled to his captive, "Give up now and I won't have to crush Waya." Sakura paled as Chuji let go of Kata, a spray of blood drawing attention to the jacket-clad boy's tanto placed between the Akimichi's left ring and pinky fingers, clearly having cut the latter. It was with another gasp from the gallery that Kata, falling to his feet, brought his blade down hard. Chuji's pinky hit the ground and rapidly shrunk, the rotund boy screaming in pain and shock. Kata clearly meant to capitalize on his panic, but wasn't paying enough attention, and was heavily smacked through the air by Chuji's giant right palm. A meaty thwack echoed through the room over Chuji's yelling, just before the sound of a body crunching against the concrete wall. Spectral. Spectral. Yoten Hatsuhashi, Hyuga Hinata, Haruno Sakura, Uzumaki Naruto, Hyuga Niji, Rock Lee, Sabaku no Gaara, Inazuka Kiba and his dog Akamaru, and a slightly sniffling Akimichi Chuji, who kept gingerly touching his bandaged hand. All stood at attention on the ruined floor of the dueling arena. All of the sensei, since all of them had at least one pupil that passed, stood before them, along with the Hokage and the sickly proctor for the third task, Gekko Heiate. The rest of the genin aside from Shikamaru, Tamari, and Kata, who were all still recovering from being knocked out, stood on the balconies, awaiting their teammates and further instructions. It was the Hokage who spoke first. Congratulations, once again, on passing the second task of the Chūnin exams, and a further well done on winning your preliminary matches. He smiled out at them all, his hands behind his back. Inside, this man was going over all of the information that had been obtained over the last few days with a level of detail and rapidity that one would wonder how he was able to remain calm. To the genin present, however, he simply appeared delighted that so many promising young ninja had been able to show their skills. Since we have an odd number of contestants for the third task, the brackets will be a little bit skewed. Some of you may end up with an additional match to fight if you win consistently. Gekko Heiate coughed and stepped forward, holding a ballot box with a large hole in the top. As I go down the line, please take a numbered ball. The Hokage watched stoically as the genin drew their lots, his eyes catching consistently on Sakura's leg and Naruto's golden pupils. If ever there was a moment that one of his genin was in danger of breaking and needing to drop from the program, it would be this incident, he was sure. And yet, Sakura had defiantly rebuked her sensei and chose to fight. Publicly, she had announced Sasuke as a traitor, vehemently citing him as the reason for her injury and molestation. Seeing the way she was determined to move forward, he could only feel proud. A pride that carried even further when considering Naruto's situation. Being stabbed in the back by a comrade, one the Hokage knew the boy had considered a friend in some ways, was normally enough to drive a genin into depression. And yet, as his lips twitched up at Naruto's exuberant display of drawing his number, he couldn't help but feel that Naruto had seemed lighter since the incident. Barring the moment of aggression during his match, Naruto had been acting quite normally. In fact, if the Hokage was willing to put aside his concerns about the implications for a moment, he would admit that Naruto was acting distinctly less forced, less tense. Internally, Hiruzen frowned. Naruto was shockingly unfazed whenever the subject of Sasuke's betrayal came up, and his suddenly more relaxed state of being. Surely Naruto hadn't been expecting this. Could a socially stunted genin really have predicted a desertion that my own analysts had designated as merely possible, but preventable? Catching Naruto's eye by chance and giving him a small smile, indicating with his head that he should be paying attention to the once again speaking proctor. He saw the answer in those golden pupils even though Naruto wasn't trying to show it. Perhaps I need some new analysts, then. Returning his own focus to Heiate as well, he caught up to the conversation just as the roster was being laid out for the third task. Cough cough, now please pay attention. I will only explain this cough 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 once. The third task will be carried out much like these preliminary matches have been, but with predetermined couplets. Round 1 will consist of 4 matches. Match 1 will be between Inazuka Kiba and Rock Lee. Hiruzen noted an excited look on the Inazuka's face before the proctor continued, having written their names on the whiteboard. Match 2 cough cough will have Haruno Sakura up against Hyuga Niji. Niji did not seem to react to this, though Sakura nodded to herself and he noticed a certain pinch to her eyes, as though already working out what she would need to do in order to defeat him. Match 3 will be Akimichi Chuji and Uzumaki Naruto. Understandably, the round boy was only more distraught at hearing this news. Match 4 will put Hyuga Hinata with cough cough Sabaku no Gaara. Several faces, Hinata's included, went white, her friends turning to look at her in panic. Hiruzen felt horrible for her, knowing what he did, but something gave him pause. Naruto only looked at her for a moment, before turning the other way and making intense eye contact with the Tsunejin Shiriki. The Hokage watched as, in the span of a mere moment, Naruto's golden-infused eyes conveyed aggression and, was that a warning? Gaara's face did not seem to change to Hiruzen, but Naruto obviously saw something, as he nodded very slightly and they broke eye contact at the same time. He was not left with much time to reflect on the implications of that exchange, as the proctor got over his latest coughing fit and continued the explanation. The winners of those matches will move to the semifinals, which will consist of 3 more matches. Cough cough match 5 will pit the winners of matches 1 and 3 together. Match 6 will be where the obvious inequality appears, as it will contain the winner of match 2 and Yoten Hatsuhashi. Match 7 will place cough 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 the winners of matches 4 and 5 together. If all cough cough goes well, this will bring us into the long-awaited final. The winners of match 6 and match 7 will go all out for the 8th and final match. Please cough 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 keep in mind, cough the winner of the final match is not guaranteed a promotion, nor does losing a match cough cough exclude you from one. Promotions will be awarded based on the ability cough cough you have displayed throughout the exams, as well as the traits generally sought after in Chūnin: strength, teamwork, tactics, and cough the ability cough cough to lead when needed. That said, cough winning your matches will give you more chances to display positive traits. To cough cough plead your case, if you will. Hiruzen held his frown in check. The doctors had assured him that Hiate's chest cold was minor, yet he couldn't help but worry. Thank you, Hiate-san. I'll take it from here. Turning to address the gathered genin, he cleared his throat and prepared to wrap up the night. Again, I wish to congratulate you all on advancing this far. Had fewer teams made it through the second task, the third task would have been slightly different, but thankfully we had prepared for this possibility. I hope that you spend your next month wisely. The third task will be pitting you not only against each other, but you will be under the scrutiny of your sensei, the leaders of your villages, and of various visiting dignitaries. Your sensei will have more information on the arena you will find yourselves in within the coming weeks, and I can't wait to see you all there. Thus, I now draw the Chūnin exam third task preliminaries to a close. I encourage you all to take some time to rest and recover before beginning on your preparations. Hayata-san will lead you to the tunnel out of the forest. Cough 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 this way, please. Hayate got out before heading to the stairs, leading the group to the corridors. Spectral. Spectral. Sorry you too, but I'd like a word first. Naruto flinched a bit when the Hokage put his hand down on his shoulder, preventing him from following the crowd. He iced he also had a hold on Sakura, and suddenly knew what kind of word their leader wanted. Unable to stop the words from tumbling out of his mouth, he at least managed a neutral tone when he said, "You want to talk about Sasuke team, don't you?" The old but powerful man nodded with a sad smile. "As well as your impressive new skills." Naruto sighed, but looked over when he felt Sakura give his hand a squeeze. He returned it with a small smile, then nodded at the Hokage. "Okay, Hokage-jichi. Lead the way." Slipping from under the old man's hand, he and Sakura turned to follow him. Ayanu. Naruto stopped and looked around at Karen, not realizing she had come down from the catwalk. Her knees were pressed together, and a nervous frown marred her cute face, but Naruto could see a glint of desperation in her eyes that was all too familiar to him. Karen-san, yes? I'm sorry, but whatever questions you may have can be handled by your sensei sure dash. That's not it. She seemed to flinch at having interrupted him, but continued in the space it created nonetheless. I want to come with you. I have information that might shed more light on what you intend to talk about Hokage-sama. Finishing with a deep, if somewhat awkward bow, Karen seemed to hold her breath after this. Naruto raised his eyebrow and opened his mouth to ask what she meant by that, when he felt his hand squeezed by Sakura again. Shutting his mouth, he turned his curious expression first to her, before settling on the Hokage, waiting to see what he would say. Sarutobi hummed quietly before turning around and continuing to walk. Then you will be speaking first when we get to my office, Uzumaki Karen-san. The redhead sprang upright, eyes wide. Naruto got the distinct impression that she was surprised that worked. He didn't get why she would be, though. The old man was a very agreeable sort of guy in his eyes. Spectral. Spectral. I don't get it. I have some kind of bloodline limit? Karen shook her head. No, the power is in your chakra, the chakra of our clan. It's a vague difference, but present all the same. Like a Kekkei Genkai, not all clan members manifest the ability, but no Uzumaki ability can be transferred to another person except their children. It's also quite variable in quality, quantity, and type. Naruto-san's one apparent ability is different from my 3 apparent abilities, for example. Hiruzen took a drag on his pipe, ignoring the slight frown on Sakura's face at his habit. And you say you've never heard of the Uzumaki chakra ability manifesting in a way similar to Naruto-kun? Karen turned to face Naruto and seemed to consider him for a moment, likely using this sight of hers before answering. No, but I only have third-hand accounts. Stories my uncle told me, aside from my own manifestation. There are some abilities that he said are more common, enough to have been named. But other times, something rare will surface or something nobody had ever seen before. According to him, my mother could connect to the chakra of animals, speak to them, live through their senses, even command them. She had another ability called the adamantine sealing chains, which is very common among Uzumaki women. Even I have it, though it's a lot weaker in me than it was in her. So, while I've never heard of this variation, I don't see any reason why it can't be attributed to his Uzumaki heritage. Karen was silent. Then, clearly feeling that she had nothing more to say on the matter. Hiruzen found himself stroking his beard at the girl's explanation, not to mention her claims. He knew that Kushina's chains were by no means a unique trait, the late mother having often spoken about other great users of it in her clan's history. But to hear that she and her clansmen had the potential for such a wide variety of abilities, not to mention that the limit of the abilities seemed to range in unpredictable ways, was surprising, to say the least. That one could go from one Uzumaki and observe the ability to talk to animals, to another Uzumaki and find them plated in a diamond-like substance was, frankly, almost too much to believe. He had heard, of course, of the Uzumaki clan possessing some truly fantastic powers, even seen a few himself, but those stories had always been attributed to their well-known talent for Fuinjutsu. Turning to look at Naruto, Hiruzen pondered what, exactly, he should even ask. Hoping to start simple and let the boy's naturally big mouth do the rest, he simply asked, "What was going on when you first noticed this ability, Naruto-kun?" He wasn't disappointed. Well, it was just after that guy betrayed us. I was on the ground, bleeding around a kunai, and Sakura-chan was in trouble. Understandably, Naruto gave her a sad look, but Sakura just reached over and squeezed his hand to encourage him to continue. Interesting. You know who showed his big ugly face and tried to get me to accept some contract or something? I didn't really pay attention. Instead, I was a little loopy from blood loss, but I know I found something inside me that I decided to release, and it wasn't you know who, Databeo. Next thing I know, I'm getting up off the ground like a badass with wings and a tail, and Sakura-chan needs my help. Hiruzen nodded. Aside from the clearly censored events within the seal, that was exactly what the report said. Just to clarify, and the armor plating? Naruto grinned and chuckled. Since I started using it, I guess it just kept trying to show me what it could do. While we were at the tower, waiting for someone to tell us what the heck to do, we noticed that little pieces of the stuff was starting to poke through the skin on my arms. I was able to pull it back in like the wings and tail, and Sakura-chan told me to try pushing it out. What you saw is what we got, Databeo. Hiruzen chuckled. Indeed. Turning to give Karen a look, he asked, "Does that sort of activation and progression sound right to you, Karen-san?" She jumped at being addressed again, clearly expecting to be excluded from then on.
Kinda?
There's rarely any indication of how quickly an ability will develop once it has manifested, nor what its final limits might be. Even in a well-established, known variation like the adamantine sealing chains or the Inokinomizu no Rankinjutsu, alchemy of the water of life, there is still a severe range in which the ability will actually operate. For example, I told you that my chains are not nearly as powerful as my mother's were said to be, right? I was comparing us on an equal stage. Her ability was several magnitudes better than mine when she was my age. It's possible that I will eventually reach the degree that she did, but it's also possible that the adamantine sealing chains are simply weak in me. In fact, it's entirely possible that none of my or Naruto-san's abilities will progress any further, that this is their maximum potential. And yet, it is equally as likely that they will continue to grow. As for the manifestation, the activation, as you said, that's a little less complex. Some abilities are already active upon birth, and require only that one begins training their chakra before becoming readily apparent, such as my sight. Most of the time, though, the strong desire to overcome something, a great need and no other option that seems viable or acceptable, these are what will manifest an Uzumaki ability, so long as the ability would actually help. I'd say that Naruto-san's situation at the time, from what I understand of it, fits the requirement. Hiruzen felt that he had more than enough information for the reports, certainly more information about the Uzumaki clan's abilities than he ever thought even existed. But there was one thing Karen had said earlier that he wanted clarification on. Thank you, Karen-san, for all of your help in explaining this to us. I'm sure Naruto-kun appreciates it as much as I do. Hell yeah. Thanks, Karen-san. This is the most I've ever known about my family,